Excuse me.
We already are in session. We swore in Marco earlier this evening. We had an executive session, so we're still continuing the session. So the next item on the agenda is our pledge of allegiance. So please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. After 25 years and the flags. All right, the next thing we have is agenda changes and conflicts. One thing I would like to add is a brief recognition of Councilor Davis. We'll keep it brief, Councilor Davis.
Yeah, actually, Tommy just reminded me that you guys need to take a vote to allow me to participate.
Yes. Okay, so if it's okay with everybody, real quick to finish that thought, I'll add that before citizens appearing before council. And then if it's okay with everybody, can we just take a vote right now to add Tony as an electronic participant to this body for this evening?
I would move due to Tony's health issues and he'd be allowed to participate tonight.
Been moved by Councilor Willman, seconded by Councilor Kopp. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Aye.
Well played, Tony, well played.
Thank you.
Still 6 to Tony.
Thank you, everyone.
Are there any other agenda changes or conflicts of interest for this evening?
I just want to note that we discussed earlier today that we're going to pull items 11A and B and vote on them separately. And we're going to continue item 11H to this.
Of the consent agenda.
Huh?
Of the consent agenda.
Oh, the consent. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
D as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're going to pull item D, 11D. All right. Sorry. All right, so I would move that we don't need a motion, do we?
Let's take one.
All right, I move that we remove items 11A and B and vote on those separately because we have people who weren't at some of those meetings. That we pull item 11D to discuss and vote on separately, and that we continue item 11H until March 17th.
It's been moved by Councilor Willman, seconded by Councilor Kopp. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, any other further agenda changes or conflicts? Okay, with that, I will turn it over to our city manager, Deborah Figueroa, who's going to give Councilor Davis a nice thing. And then we're going to say some brief nice things too.
We just want to say thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
There are aspects of this I will miss as well. Other aspects that maybe I won't. Thank you. You know, I would like to say, prepare just a short speech. And that is that in my lifetime, I have held a number of positions. And never have I held a position that really was more rewarding than sitting in that chair for 7 years. It's a great thing to have the opportunity to be able to make change and kind of guide your hometown. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the staff helping us to make those things happen. We built 7 bridges, I think, in 7 years. That's a lot. Thank you very much.
So this is when it's appropriate for us to all say a very nice short thing. Now, if there's no takers, that's fine too. Go ahead, Charlie.
I went. I ran for council back in 2017, was beat by this lady at my left. And Steve had talked to me a lot about, the duties and the responsibilities of the job. And I think convinced me of the rewards of it. So I came back and did the skit in 2019 and was rewarded by being now sitting up here. Had a chance to work with Steve throughout the years in the DDA and other things in the downtown area, especially his dedication to making sure the downtown was an economically viable and robust area throughout the years of his service has been phenomenal. And I want to thank you for that, Steve, very much.
say, I think I have to tune this on.
Yeah.
I'll just say thank you, Steve. It was very much a pleasure to serve with you up here, and you have a vision for this city, and I hope you were able to forward that vision a little bit. I think you were, and we see that in the downtown especially, and along our rivers, and I appreciate that. So thank you. It was a pleasure to work with you.
And when I came on, I learned a lot about the process and the fact that so much of it is relationship based and an opportunity to see different perspectives and collectively make a good decision for Glenwood, which you did. You took this community to a place that at times was hard. You told me stories of hard nights and hard decisions that propelled the community to where we are now, which I think we're in a better place for. So thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your patience with some of us. I thought in some capacities you were. So, and thank you just for all you did. You are a pillar in our community, and our community is fortunate to have you. Mhm.
Steve, I learned to kind of be quiet sometimes. I know I ask a lot of questions, but what I just appreciated more than anything is you would wait and you would listen, and then you would put your thoughts together. And there are many times I made decisions based on things that you would say in those last minutes. And I just really appreciate that depth and the way that you looked at things, and thought it was a great compliment to this whole council. And you will be missed. And hopefully Marco can follow somewhat in those steps. Although I do say I'm a little envious of you tonight because you didn't have to read the packet.
And I can walk out anytime I want.
There we go. Thank you.
Excellent. Just real quick, we never worked together up here, but I want to thank you for your numerous appointments of me to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because I just kept on doing it and I really enjoyed it, and wish I had the chance, but you know where you live. So thank you, Steve.
And I'll say, when I got on council, I was given some advice. So be careful about that Steve Davis. He will sneakily get things done. You won't even know how effective he is. And I found that to be not true at all. You are not sneaky. You are effective. You have vision. You have a true north. And when you set your mind to something, that is what you try to get all of us and the community on board. And I think it's been really instrumental for me, having never served as a lot of you up here on any board or commission, but being able to sit next to you for the first 2 years was invaluable for me to understand what matters, what doesn't matter, and what I really needed to focus on. So I would say a lot of the success I have, well, success is so relative. A lot of the satisfaction of my accomplishments and how I feel about this job is based on your mentorship, Steve. So thank you so much. And we can't let you go without giving you just a little bit of crap. So it's just coming. It's coming. I don't know if we have a graphic to show, but we also wanted to present you, Steve, with this token of our appreciation.
You gonna put that down?
Well, it's for wherever you want to put it. Me personally, I want you to come up here. You got to accept this. And as a sober and thoughtful individual, I just want to point out a sober, thoughtful individual who always takes life and this job and seriously. I'm not sure that's me.
I have no recollection.
So I think thank you, honestly, on behalf of all of us, and
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Put that somewhere where it's going to be.
Box of chocolates.
When you open it up, you'll notice it doesn't have a year on it for reasons.
Because you never do when.
That was written how you purchased your second year on council.
It does say Steve Davis, City Council, City of Glenwood Springs, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I'm not sure I need to keep time.
You're tired, you don't have to.
Yes.
Going for dignified and then also very silly.
Thank you. I appreciate all you guys very much. It'll be hard. For, like a minute or two.
It'll be hard until you get back to your deck tonight.
And you can always sit down with us after council meetings downtown.
Starting this evening.
And we do expect an occasional phone call, but we still share your vision.
Well, you all have my number.
Is it appropriate now to reduce the riparian zone down to 10%?
Okay.
Just checking. All right, thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah.
All right, we going to move on for citizens appearing before council for items not appearing on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back. James, did you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess.
You look compl-
I was curious, I'm not aware of how you terminate these things.
Well, if it's on the, if you want to have your 3 minutes now or later, just take it.
I think it's probably appropriate if I talk now, and there's not a huge crowd here. I may try to go and push just a little past the 3. But first, I want to say to Steve as well, when I was the Parks and Rec Commission chair and Steve was our liaison, he helped us move a lot of things. And I do think that that should be considered for the Two Rivers boat ramp, because Steve helped us push through that boat ramp and it was very helpful. So that's my comment. Thanks, Steve, for your work with us. But the reason I'm here now is because not as a Parks and Rec Commission member, but more as a member of the steering committee for the comp plan. And I know that's on speaking later on tonight. I've been on that commission. We've had 2 meetings and I think we've started in the wrong place. I think what we were experiencing, and I've talked to a number of the people, so I'm not speaking for anyone, but I have spoken to several people. We were under the impression that we were there to give input, and it seemed like we were receiving direction, but getting input or being allowed to give input. We were just hearing from the people who were working on the plan. And so the first thing I would ask of council is, if we're seriously trying to have a vision for Glenwood, then we need direction from you as to what you want out of the comp plan. Because I see Glenwood as somewhat divided in where it wants to go. And this is a critical point where council needs to provide direction to the steering committee so that we can tell them and your staff what we're hearing out in the community and what we know, whether we're a member of the Parks and Rec Commission, whether we're a member of the various things. You got Andy Mueller from the River District. There are a number of commission members and other people. And we have a lot of input about the 20 or so areas that really can be developed within the city. But we haven't been asked. And when I went to the Vision Quest, or what is it, Vision Glenwood website, and I looked at the goals and it said that we were there as a sounding board. But you got to ask us our opinions, not tell us what you want to hear. Like, you should set the goals and then we should work with your consultants and staff to set an agenda. I mean, I see infill and expansion versus the annexation issues as something that is a big issue. We've already heard numerous times at the steering committee that housing is the biggest issue out there, whether it's rental housing or home ownership, providing affordable housing. I think we should not look at form in this. We should look at function. And the function is, you need to give us direction so that we can give them direction. And I want to be heard, not have to listen to it, because I can pick up and go on the website and look at what they've got in the reports. It's not to say that they aren't doing a job, but I found it almost offensive that I was being compared to Carbondale as a Glenwood citizen, or to Lakewood, or to Durango, because Glenwood is none of those communities. And so I would like to ask council, give direction to people so that you can listen to us, because I think that's why you asked us to be formed. And that's all I really have to say, unless you have questions.
I do have a question. What? It's hard to give direct. I mean, it's hard just for me personally to say, well, here's the direction that I would like to give. What direction would you like, I mean, what would your recommendation be on the steering committee of direction that you would like, or clarification on some of those goals?
Well, first, I sit on Parks and Rec, so you know I have an interest in parks, and we've already talked about rafting and the boat ramp. And I think that when we're working on a comp plan, we have to incorporate lifestyle. Like, what is it that we're doing in our community to make people get out and exercise, fitness, and bring us together as a community? I mean, I've moved to downtown Glenwood from Oak Meadows so I could walk to places, I could walk to work. And I think that that's something that we should be emphasizing, is getting people to be active in our community. It's healthy, it's good for everybody, makes people happy, and may calm some of the anger out in our community. I've noticed it in the last couple of years. Our community has changed in some ways where we seem like we're not working together, but we're working group against group. So I think that you have to listen to everybody. I don't agree with everybody. I think their opinions count. I think you should be asking people, what is it Glenwood wants to be? Do we want to be a community that is stuck at 10,000, which is nice? Or do we want to be a community that grows to 15? Or do we want to make this a place where people want to call it a home, not just a transient place? I see home ownership and affordable housing as one of the most critical things that has to go into the comp plan. And that means thinking outside of the box. Means, do we give everybody an ADU in town and say, you make it an affordable rental unit for 2 years, and then you can rent it out as a VRBO? Something that gives it an incentive to make it affordable for people who want to come here and work. But more importantly, when people come here and work, they want to be a part of the community. That means owning, being the guy who owns a house, cuts his grass, paints his house. They feel like they're part of the community. We don't have any affordable housing. And over the pandemic, it's only gotten worse. So that's something I would like to see direction. And that's probably the toughest thing that's facing this community. You got angry homeowners about expansion out at the mall, and whether or not we want to do expansions out at the Meadows. That's what we want you as council to provide guidance is. Glenwood is going to move for growth or managed growth or building up infill. That has to come from you. And if people don't like what you do, you'll get voted out and somebody else will come there and they'll decide it. That's democracy. But I want to see direction about lifestyle, whether we're a home ownership based community. I don't want to be like Aspen where affordable housing is kind of a joke. That's it.
Okay.
You asked, I'm sorry.
I did. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Since you are on the steering committee, do you feel like, so that input that you just gave is what I would expect to come to hear from the
That's-
steering
that's-
committee and from other members of the community? And I think that might be the consultant's job when they get to that point. I feel like as a member of council, if we dictate what we want, I mean, we're going to get the final say. We're going to get the final vote on the direction with the comp plan based on what we hear from the community. So if we put that out there in the front and say, well, this is the direction we're going, then why would anybody show up?
Well-
So I guess I want to hear what, like, for example, what you just told us, and hopefully that will be gathered through the
I won't
consultant.
respond nearly as long as I did to Jonathan.
Okay,
But what I would say is, when you get on a plane, you should know where you're going to land. And all I want to know is, where do you want us to land? And then we'll figure out as the steering committee and with your consultants and with the staff about how to get there. That's what I'm asking for you. I think there's a lot of people in that commission. You were on there, Marco, and I think there's a lot of people who care about this community. They want to see it, but we want to know where you want us to go. We'll get you there.
mhm. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I know we have this as an agenda. Do you want to talk about this more now or?
I think it's better
Right.
appropriate. Sorry, I didn't quite know the nature of it. So if you want to stay around for the agenda, that'd be awesome, if you're able to.
And I want to respond to you, but we got an agenda and we got to stay with that. So.
That
You're
is
welcome
fine.
to
I'll be
talk.
happy to sit. If you want to ask me or
Yeah, I
participate in
think we
that,
should.
I will stay for
Right.
the agenda item and I'll let you get on with your business between now and then.
Thank you, sir. All right, any other members of the citizenry, care to council? Care to comment, jeez, good word. All right.
Online, John?
Is there anybody online that would like to? Great, thank you, Charlie. Anybody online? Okay. No? Okay. All right, I will bring it back for council comments. Paul.
I'd like to ask our council and our community to take a minute of respect and silence for what is happening in the Ukraine and the fight for democracy. My feeling is from talking to community members, this is very important to many of us, and I think we should acknowledge what is happening over there. So if we could do that, and council agrees.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's take a minute. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I'll let people go from there.
Any other comments? I'll just,
I do.
okay, oh, please.
Yes. I just wanted to comment that there have been quite a few of our boards and commissions, long-serving volunteers that because of board, the term limits have recently stepped down. And I know that we sent out cards to say thank you, but I want to use this venue to really express gratitude. Sumner Shackner, Sandy Lowell, Andy Mueller. There have been people, and I'm sure there's others, that have given so many nights and meeting times to miss with their family in order to help propel this community to where we are now. And I thank them so much for their commitment and their intelligence and just in they're just serving our community so well. So thank you all.
Thanks, Ingrid. Any other council comments?
Charlie's green.
No,
Oh, sorry.
Nothing.
I still would like to, having been absent for one council meeting, I still would like to bring back and hope that we move forward on this idea of a little bit more detail on our council minutes for review. And I know we talked about it in a work session, but I just want to keep it up on the more current level.
We just haven't,
Okay.
we have not gotten to it in any way, shape or form.
Okay, I just having to read the minutes and go, okay, but luckily you guys had recordings and I got to watch everything, but it would be nice to have that succinct. Yeah, kind of like the planning and zoning, but thank you.
Bring you back options, the potential costs, but we
Okay.
just haven't, I
Great.
haven't touched it honestly, but oh, we will.
Okay, well, is ever doing planning and zoning notes? Thumbs up, because I always like seeing those and reading through them real quick.
Just real quick, and I think we talked about it this afternoon. I just want to confirm, are we going to talk tonight about possible virtual hybrid meetings?
I think that's on the next agenda.
That we moved that to next.
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't want to lose it. I want to
Yeah.
keep moving forward. I think it'll benefit all of us at some point.
Yeah, I think we're using Councilor Hershey's experience this evening, both from our experience and I will be interested to hear Councilor Hershey's experience of his involvement or lack of at the next meeting.
Like a test run.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda absent A, B, D, and H.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Counselor Willman, seconded by Counselor Dim. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries unanimously with Counselor Hershey voting in the affirmative.
Do you want me to, I can make a motion that we continue the adoption of the.
I think you're into that.
Did we do that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Never mind.
never mind.
I vote for the approval of February 17th minutes. I'm gonna do them separately for people who may be abstaining. So
Let's use the buttons.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I move for the approval of the February 17, 2022 city council minutes.
Moved by Counselor Willem, seconded by Counselor Cobb. All those, okay, we're gonna vote.
Wait, I have to, sorry, everyone, I have to text.
That's okay. I'm assuming it's a yes, Tony.
Well, don't assume.
It's a yes.
Yes, thank you.
It passed. It passes
Yeah, no.
unanimous.
Wellman, yes. Hershey, yes. Judge, yes. Cal, yes, with the remaining abstaining because they weren't at the
Carl, to clarify, are you catching Tony's?
meeting. I am, just as a convenience thing, I'm gonna let,
I move for the approval of the February 25th, 2022 special city council minutes.
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Wellman, seconded by Counselor Kaup.
Counselor Willman, yes. Counselor Hershey, yes. Counselor Wusa, yes. Mayor Godus, yes. Counselor Dem abstain. Counselor Step, yes. And Counselor Kaup, yes. And then I apologize, it's Mayor Pro Tem Willman.
I walked into it, I'm like. You're on, Charlie.
All right, is there any other, we've already continued
D.
H,
Yeah.
D.
Talk about D.
D.
We have item D, we have to talk about.
Yeah,
Yes,
so,
I just have questions.
okay,
Are we ready?
Yep.
To go for that? And Brian, I don't know if I direct.
you push your button.
Yep.
Brian, I don't know if I direct these to you. I just had a question. Item D on the consent agenda was for City Hall HVAC system upgrades. But I know we have had some discussion about bringing back the energy performance service contracts that we talked about a couple of years ago. And that might be forthcoming.
That's
later this
at the
year?
next council meeting on March 17th. We'll
Okay.
have the state energy office here and we'll do a presentation on that.
Fantastic. And I think typically these kind of, this is, fairly large upgrade to HVAC and especially the control system, that might be part of an energy service contract. So is this critical right now, or is it close to failure? Or would it behoove us to wait until it's part of the whole package?
It is critical. It's not close to failure. It has failed. We are on manual control right now
Really?
for the
Okay.
building. While the controller itself could be included in a performance contract mechanism, it's not as critical as some of the equipment and systems that we put in place.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about all those projects. I mean, we've done 24 energy efficiency projects in the time that I've been here over the last 5 years. And we have, 5 times as many of that we're looking to implement with some of
Looking
these.
to do.
So we'll talk about all that at the next meeting. I feel pretty good that you could go ahead and go forward with the controller at this time.
And that will be incorporated
Yeah.
into the new system. It looks like it's being commissioned and everything, so.
Yep. Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, I will make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, what we took off, item D for the City Hall HVAC system upgrades.
Been moved by Counselor Kaup, seconded by Counselor Step. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. I believe we're on to item number 12, the comprehensive plan update.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. We don't actually have a presentation for this. The consultant from Cushing Carroll, Keith, is still here. And there are some members of the audience who may want to address you, including perhaps Mr. Fosnot again. So if you have any questions for us, we're happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay,
Yeah.
let's go Shelley, then Martha.
I guess I have a question about the issue that was brought up. Thank you, Steve. The issue that was brought up by a member of the steering committee, Mr. Fosnot. And, kind of that chicken or the egg, is it better for council to give direction? Because, I I certainly know what my vision is for where the community to go, and I'm sure each of us has a vision. Is it better for us to put that out there now and say, this is where we want the community to go? Or do we work through the process and listen, take the input from the community and then evaluate all the different options of how we get to where we want to go?
And I might invite Keith to come up and have a conversation with you about that. I would say that, these kinds of processes where you are taking a lot of public input and trying to crunch a lot of numbers and data, there's always going to be this push and pull of what comes first and what do we want?
Right,
How do we
right.
address all of these issues? We just would love for it all to be ready and done, and for us to have had that process. But we anticipate that there'll be lots of these kinds of conversations, and that the steering committee will have the opportunity to give some more feedback. I think the very first meeting, the steering committee was asked a lot of questions. The second was more processing of data. This third steering committee meeting is intended to be, again, more interactive, but I'll let Keith speak for Cushing Terrell.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Let me answer that question. We work in a lot of communities doing.
Mind introducing yourself?
Oh, excuse me. My name is Keith Walzak. I'm with Cushing Terrell, from Denver area.
Thank you.
To help try to answer that question, we work in a lot of communities. We work for counties, we work for municipalities. When we do comprehensive plans, our experience is that it's about process and it's about participation, particularly in these days where social equity is a very key driver. Comprehensive plans, establishing a vision should come from the community. You should be able to hear those opinions, those voices. And our job as the consultant is to try to document that information in an objective way so that you have information to sort through. Rarely do we work for a community where an elected body decides what the vision is, and then you go to the community to engage the community in a process after that decision is made. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. We know it has to come from the ground up. That's our experience, and that's what we've designed the process around.
And that, thank you for that, because that's feels more correct to me, even though it's probably hard for the community because they do look to us for leadership. But in order for this to be a true process, I feel like first we need to hear from the community, because we work on this stuff every day and day to day, and we may all have our opinions, but until we hear from the community, how can we really update this plan? So I appreciate that. And that's the reason for that.
The process I described also doesn't diminish your roles as leaders. Not at all.
Right.
Marco and then Ingrid. I think my question is for Jen, a quick, what we did this afternoon, the work session about the comp plan, that's public record, right?
It is. We recorded it. I don't think we broadcast it to YouTube
But it's recorded and the steering committee could listen to that if they were so inclined.
they certainly.
And
can.
I highly recommend you do that because we heard some things today that were very, very effective, at least in my mind, from the consultant. And I think you would feel the same way once you listen to it. I think it's an important step to the puzzle. Thank you.
And Keith, now that you heard Mr. Fosnot's comments from just a few minutes ago, how did that resonate with you? Like, where's your next step taking that into consideration?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the comments. We respect every comment that we hear from the community. And second of all, it challenges me as your consultant to do a better job to communicate in a different way. So I think that's my first response. I'm a kind of an analytic, fact-based kind of person. And I think it's important to make sure the facts are out there. And so we have to communicate that as clearly as possible. We have a contract with you for about $189,000 to do a 12-month study. And these comprehensive plans are not easy. They're just not easy. we have established a process that has 3 major community events staggered over the 6-8 months. We've developed a specialized website. The website QR code is on everybody's chairs. We've made sure that everything is in English and Spanish. We're going to have our second community event coming up in April 20th. We have 8 steering committees lined up. We've had 2 already. The first one was focused solely on listening. We asked 3 basic questions. What do you love about your community? What concerns you about the future? What keeps you up at night? And what do you think the opportunities are? We listened and we documented that information. We postponed our January project steering committee for a couple of different reasons. And in February, the topic was housing, jobs, and mobility. Very complicated topics. It's important to make sure that the participants that are on the steering committee are all working at the same baseline, same level of information. So we took that opportunity to make sure we were giving factual information on demographics, housing, jobs, so that people have information that's objective. We're going back to the steering committee next week to continue that same conversation, to talk about high-level growth strategies, to get preferences from the steering committee. Do we feel like that we should be looking at no growth, closing the borders, no more development? Or should we be looking at the other end of the spectrum, which might include development annexations outside the city limits?
Yeah.
So we haven't had that conversation with the steering committee yet. We're going to have that with them next week. So we have a very systematic approach that's all about process. And we gather information all along the way. So those are my initial reactions. We just have to make sure we're clear about what the plan is, what the process is going forward, and how people in the community can engage in the process.
So with all that in mind, I appreciate structure. I love data. I'm super data driven as well. Ultimately though, and this is the nuances of living in a small town, I've received feedback from quite a few of the members of the steering committee. And their, inherent in a steering community is the opportunity to express desire for the community and to be heard. It's like the seek first to understand and then be understood. I have received some feedback from the steering committee members that they haven't had as many opportunities maybe to speak. And maybe that's just the format, that there's more of an educational component prior to hearing from the community. And you want to touch on that?
Well, I think that's exactly right.
Okay.
The first steering committee was a listening session.
Okay.
It was all about visioning, aspiration, values,
Sure.
listening from those participants,
Okay.
people who live and work here.
Mhm.
We set up a framework, asked 3 basic questions, and we listened. The second steering committee, as I just described, very technical sets of information. We have to walk through the minutia of that information. We're following up on that same conversation next week as a listening participatory process. So it is frustrating for some people who don't do this for a living. But there has to be a system in place.
Sure.
And part of that system is getting reliable, strong data out there and then listening to the community at the same time.
Okay.
And that's our plan. We're also very adaptive. If something isn't working, we can modify our approach. We're okay with that. But we've done this a lot. We feel comfortable. And I think people have to kind of get comfortable with the process.
Great. And then the last thing is, in reflecting today, you had an opportunity to express that there was some slides that maybe were misinterpreted. Did you want to touch on that?
Well, yeah, there was highly technical information.
Okay.
Our market economics consultant, Leland Consulting, laid out a framework, many slides that showed, historically population growth, showed building permits, very technical information. At one point, there were 2 or 3 slides where Leland was demonstrating how we think about population growth. Part of your comprehensive plan is, what can we expect in terms of population and household units over the next 15 years? How do we determine what that number is? And there's different methodologies for doing that. Ted laid out 3 different methodologies. One was simply just projecting forward. Since 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you have a steady slight growth, some dips, but it's steady. And you project forward, and that's one method of doing that. The other method is to continue to look at that growth projection in comparison to existing capacities, city limits, roadway capacity, roads, and make broad assumptions. And so in letting people know that while this trajectory might be true, it's also inhibited by constraints. And so that's what Leland was showing. And in an estimate, a pure estimate, one scenario might be you could be at 10,000, 12,000 people in the next 15 years if you choose not to change any policies, if you choose not to increase capacity, if you choose not to annex. So that's what we were attempting to do. We heard the criticism. So I think we have to do a better job in making sure that what we're laying out is broad assumptions, methodologies, so that when we come back a second time, we can debate those assumptions and we can talk about them. Because if we don't agree with them, we want to hear from the community members, I don't agree with that. And that's fair. That's absolutely fair. That's the purpose of the next meeting.
Sure. So to clarify, one slide in particular was not a recommendation or a strategy that you will encourage our community to take on, but rather one way of interpreting data based on kind of one type of model, not looking really in Glenwood, but rather where we are right now and where we could go based on policy.
Based on those broad assumptions on that model,
Okay.
that's a data set.
Okay. And
Correct.
do you believe that the steering committee was super clear on that? That they understood that?
No, I do not
Okay,
believe they were
okay,
clear. I'm
great.
I'm reading the emails. They're
Okay,
not
great.
clear on it, but at that meeting, we weren't getting direct feedback. So, that's the whole process, right? People go and they think about it and they talk to each other, and now they're not clear about it. So now we have to be clear about it.
Okay.
So that's our challenge, of course.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to interrogate. I just wanted
No,
to
that's fine.
immediately dial that in for clarity.
Yeah, and I think one other point, in the 12-month calendar that we're working with, the first 2 months were simply initiation, start, kickoff. Who are the focus groups? Who are the steering committee members? What's the website? We're now in the second phase, which is basically a data gathering exploration phase. Right? In 2 months, we're going to talk about parks, environment, climate, resiliency, right? Just like we are housing and jobs. Once we get through the exploration, the data gathering, and by the way, you're never done getting information, we'll then move into a draft recommendation phase. And that's anticipated to be this summer. We're nowhere near making recommendations at this point. We're simply making sure the data is understood by everybody that's participating in the process.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Hold on a second. I think Charlie was next, and then Tony had his hand up. So, good job. And push your buttons.
Keith, I'm going to be a little more transparent and not be as circumventive as Ingrid was with the question. Some people approached me and said that the consultant came and said, your direction was to come up with 11,000 population for the city of Glenwood Springs as a cap. And I want to debunk that because that's what I think you're saying. That is not what the information that you guys were providing. It was part of that database you were talking about. Is that correct?
That's correct. We were never directed by anyone to use that number as a starting point. We were never directed by that way.
That 11,000 is not a cap that you can be considered in any kind of this is an ultimate goal.
It's definitely not a cap. It's a scenario that we should look at if you agree with that particular model.
Okay.
But it's not a cap, no.
And just because that number's been floated, I want to make sure we talked about it in public that is not there. So thank you very much.
I think we're on. All right. Tony.
Thank you. And thank you, Keith. And I apologize for not being there in person. I hope you can hear me okay. I heard Mr. Fosnet's questions and I share many, if not all of his concerns. We're not Lakewood. I like Carbondale, but we're not Carbondale. Sorry, Jim, I like Carbondale. But I think I'm very, and this isn't me talking particularly, although personally I'm very skeptical, but I think what you have to look at, Keith, and I was curious how you're going to address it, is a great amount of skepticism. And it's not just the annexation that is controversial. There are a lot of people, and I call them maybe like a snow globe person, who just, I'm happy here. It's a nice place. I don't want to change, we don't want more housing, or we want a lot of change and then we want to be a different place. And then people say, well, then move to that place. So how are you going to balance all of those things? I mean, if you put, I think, 2 Glenwoodians in a room, as I think Jonathan would agree, you might get 10 opinions. So there's a lot of different people. None of us can predict the future, but I understand what you're saying about it's a process and we have to, you know, we can't say, this is what we're going to do. What do you think? We have to do, what do you think? This is what we're going to do. But I think, like to Ingrid's questions, whenever you put out one little slide, everyone's going to harp on it and it's very controversial. So I don't envy your position, Keith, but I think a lot more listening and talking, not just listening, as Mr. Fosnett said, but talking back and forth and giving communication back and forth and ideas back and forth would be really, really helpful. But really, thank you. And I look forward to meeting you when I'm there in person. Thank you, Keith.
Okay, well, can I reply back? One of the things I heard was that we are comparing Glenwood with Carbondale. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We were, as a part of an ad service, we were asked to identify a series of communities in Colorado where we could look at those communities to understand their policies on growth strategies. So we looked at 5 communities. 3 of the 5 communities have very formal policies on how to cap and limit growth. The other 2, Durango and Carbondale, were selected for 2 different reasons. Durango is very similar to Glenwood Springs in many, many ways. Geographically, population-wise, the way they're structured, their government. Carbondale, we are just finishing up their comprehensive plan update. And we thought it would be interesting to put Carbondale in that mix of communities because they do not have a formal policy. They don't want to go in that direction. And they have a different sort of way of doing things. And the point was to show a spectrum of case studies. No one said or assumed that Glenwood was like Carbondale. We didn't say that. We wouldn't say that. We, 2 years ago, did the Basalt Master Plan. 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I did the Garfield County Master Plan when I was with Jeff Winston Associates. I know the difference between these communities up and down the Roaring Fork Valley. We would never say that Glenwood Springs is like Carbondale. We would not say that. I think somebody just misunderstood something. To answer your other question, how will we move forward? We're always going to hear opinions that are differing. That's what you want. You want to understand the varying value sets. What we then have to do is demonstrate that while there's a group of people over here that believe in this approach and another group over here, we have to demonstrate trade-offs. And then you as a community have to work through that. The community has to work through that. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to facilitate a process. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the elected officials to make some decisions, because we know that there's going to be a lot of different opinions out there.
Thank you, Keith, so much.
Keith, is the time frame that we've put on this enough? I mean, do we need to add 2 months? I just kind of feel like what I'm hearing tonight is, okay, we're doing this and then we're doing this and it just kind of feels like there's a lot. And I know there's a bit of an urgency on some of this council's mind of we're getting feedback and we need to see where to go with the comp plan, but I also don't want to rush a process that needs the time put into it. So I'm just asking.
That's a great question. There's two thoughts that come to mind. There shouldn't be a sense of urgency. You should take the time you need to sort through this. This is important. It's going to dictate your policies for the next 15 years. So that's critical. We are finding that communities are coming to us with smaller budgets to do comprehensive plans and not enough time. It's just happening. I keep telling my wife I should have been a plumber because I would have my own fleet and I could have been retired by now. But we love doing this work because we want to help you navigate through these things. 12 months is a very short time period, but the city has a budget and we don't want to extend the duration too long. So certainly 24 months is, in our opinion, is way too long. 12 months is doable, but our good friends up in Carbondale, we had a 12-month study and we provided them a draft plan, and the Planning and Zoning Commission is realizing they need more time to think about this. to navigate through it. So we're on hold while they deliberate with a draft plan. So we're not even calculating that period of time that's needed once we give a draft plan to you all. You're going to have to really think about it, and you're going to hold hearings, and you're going to want to listen to from the public. So that's not built into the 12-month calendar, by the way.
So there is a possibility then that we'll need to have gaps or extend this, have stop gaps while for you.
So having gaps is problematic because what you try to do is build momentum, and you don't want people to get burned out on the process.
Right.
You want to script it in a way that you have intense community involvement for a specific purpose.
Mhm.
Get to the point where you're comfortably drafting a plan, but make sure you as elected officials and the Planning and Zoning Commission have enough time to really think it through.
And that's where I was thinking the gap is, okay, now we need 2 months for people to think.
I don't think of it as a gap. I think of just
A-
making
a
sure you have
stall.
the calendar there to do that.
Right,
But-
right. Okay. Maybe it's something we as a council then should talk about what that might look like.
But I will say that the planning process that we've laid out, the steering committee meetings, the focus groups, the community events, and from our standpoint is doable. But what happens always is that people start to get a little nervous. It potentially might slow the process down, but I think more importantly, it's up to us then to meet with individuals one-on-one and to understand that. In all just transparency, we talked with Mark Gould a week and a half ago. I had a great conversation with him. He participated in 2 of the virtual workshops. And I think having that one-on-one conversation with Mark was hugely helpful. Did we resolve any differences? Maybe not, but that's what has to happen. And oftentimes we're not able to build those milestones in a process because we have to plan for the next community event or the next series of focus groups. So it is challenging.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I had just a little bit to add, and we talked about this earlier in the work session, but I agree with what Charlie mentioned. And I think too, it has a little bit to do with communication and how ideas are communicated. And that one particular graph that raised an ire, when I look at it, the title of it is Historical and Projected Glenwood Springs Population. But yet it shows an orange line or kind of a red line that's labeled as modeled capacity. So I think that calling something capacity is much different than calling it projected population based on historical data. So just being really careful about how a graphical representation is communicated, because people can grab onto that and cause a lot of ire in the community. So
Yeah, no, that particular chart is complicated
yes.
because the orange line is showing a inherent capacity.
Okay.
The
I guess I'd
roads
like
can
to
only support so much.
understand more about the data in it, because when I read the report, it does not sound like those were the inputs. So being a
Good.
data person, I'd love to understand that more, but.
I think what we have good data people, but we
Okay.
need to make sure it's being communicated to
Right.
the spectrum of individuals who are absorbing that information. So, but yes, we need to focus on that.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that.
Marco has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Only if I may.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Well, and I'd like to take public comment as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just real, thank you, Mr. Mayor, real briefly. And that this goes, not, thank you, Keith, not to you, but to the steering committee. I've been on, 4 steering committees during my P&Z career. And one of them was the 6th Street beautification, whatever you want to call it. Usually you have the luxury of having data and input and staff guiding you along. Chicken or egg, it's really hard to pinpoint that. On the 6th Street steering committee, you have to imagine it was a room full of people and nobody knew what to do. And there was no direction. There was no trees, bike lanes. It comes from you. The whole process starts at the steering committee. You guys brainstorm, you guys sit down and you throw out whatever you want to throw out into that room and see how it resonates. that's how we came up with the steering committee. It was a very awkward process in the beginning until we got comfortable with each other and started talking. And that's how I think this will also evolve eventually. So again, listen to what they said this afternoon. It was a nice piece of the puzzle that I think is invaluable to this entire process. And just talk. I think it's very helpful to communicate. So anyway, that was it. Just a little experience.
And when Marcus says talk, I will have Mr. Fosnock come up if you want to have a few more comments.
Just a couple.
But when I said talk, I didn't actually mean that as an encouragement.
So I appreciate it because I think I hear that Keith is listening to the feedback that happened today and it's coming from council and from Mark. And I've met with Mark and I've met with Sandy Lowell and I know Sandy was at the work session. I talked to him afterwards, so I kind of have an idea of what happened. The thing that I took out of coming into this process was when Trent Hyatt called me up, he said, "You're on Parks and Rec. We want to get your input on this. Do you want to sit on the steering committee?" And I said, "Sure," because I care about it. Obviously, that's why I'm on Parks and Rec, and thank you guys for appointing me to that. And then when I was looking through in preparation for today about, because I'm not here to complain. I'm trying to help you guys and Keith and the steering committee be more effective. And so on the Vision Glenwood site, it says board and commission representatives are on the steering committee, Colorado River District, Latina community, Mountain Family, Development and Real Estate. And I don't pertain, I have no idea about what the River District's involvement is or what Andy Mueller brings to the table, but he has something to bring to the table to this because obviously water is a big component of what we do. But that's not my area. I've been on Parks and Rec for almost 4 years and I like parks. I helped with the boat ramp. I'm pushing for you guys to do stuff with trails and I don't get everything I want, but I'm a voice there and I want you guys to listen to me. And with regard to the steering committee, it's the same thing. I know that's coming, like as I see it, because the Parks and Rec Commission may be down the road. But I think that what really maybe the one-on-one or sitting down more with the representatives of the community might be more effective in getting us prepared for those group meetings where we're all sitting there coming together and we're not like trying to figure out what we're doing as we're doing it. So one of the complaints I heard from some people is, can we get some stuff in advance so that like, just like you get a council packet, can we get some stuff in advance and not like the day before? Because this data requires some analysis and sitting down and thinking about it. Give it to us a week or two before. And so I can look through it and then I'll come in and I'll say, Keith, I read page 13 and I didn't like how you compared this to Durango. And then you can say, well, that's not what I was doing. I was trying to do this. And I feel like if we're doing that in the meeting, we're not being productive, and getting the information in advance is important. First, I want to acknowledge that Tony Hershey said something like he likes Carbondale. I do too. I'm not trying to say that we are not Carbondale in a bad way. We're just not Carbondale. We are a different community. Carbondale is a great community. I like going up there. I lived in Carbondale for a number of years. Glenwood's just a little bit better for me, and that's why I chose to live here. But I think meeting one-on-one with some of the representatives on the steering committee would be a good thing for them to do. And I also think, I agree with Councilor Stepp. Let's not rush this process, but let's not delay it. I mean, we've got to move forward. But I think let's move forward strategically so that we get a good process. Because at the end of the day, I may not agree with what is in the comp plan, but I want to be able to say, and I think everybody in the community wants to say, I was heard. And that's really what I'm pushing for. Is I felt like, just my perception, and I heard it from others, and I think all of you have heard it. We didn't feel like we were being heard, and that may be a communication thing. And we can all work on better communications. But if we can get our voices heard, you'll get a better comp plan.
Thanks, James. And James, thanks for all your work on Parks and Rec as well.
Well, I'm not the chair now, so.
I did 4 years ain't nothing. So thank you for that work. Mr. Gould.
Mark Gould, 200 Oak Lane. Now I know that you have to have a Juris Doctor to get more than 3 minutes with the mayor.
Well,
I understand
so somebody
that.
didn't put a timer on the dang thing.
I understand that. Okay, so
I got one on you now.
So the last time I was in front of you, I was fighting the moratorium. Thank you for not passing the moratorium. But at the same meeting, you basically said, we want Cushing-Terrell to go a little fast in the first part of the program, build it so that we can get some input, because we know that the city wants to hear from us. And so fundamentally, you are 40% of the way through getting input from from the steering committee. The steering committee has had 2 meetings, and I've been to all these meetings, by the way, including, December and January, and they have March, April, May, and start drafting this in June. And they kind of did it. I mean, I sat here remembering Deborah going, listen, we need some more input. Earlier, we can get input. That was an argument for not having the moratoriums, because we can get input early. I would take 2 more months, just suggesting. I would take June and July and get some more input and start drafting in August. Now, I don't know whether that will work, but it just seems, I've been through all the meetings, just a little rush. There's a lot to get through, and there's only 60% of them. I'm a math guy, 60% of the meetings left to do before we start drafting. And it would seem to me that we need to slow this down just 2 months. And it was accelerated by you with your direction. So you could give direction to just take those 2 months away and start drafting in August and have a little bit more input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. As somebody who travels Midland every day, I'm glad that you're 60% of the way done with that as well. I'm a math guy too. And I'm glad that you guys are back on the job. It's great to see you back there. Anybody else from the public? No? Okay. I'd love to hear some comments to some of those comments, if people have them. Or a motion. Go ahead, Ingrid.
I am completely comfortable with a couple months extension if it feels as though it's not going to slow down the trajectory of the whole process or lose the momentum. However, I think that Keith's recommendation of asking for that from planning and zoning, like I think planning and zoning is really, they're the ones who are going to be the body that is moving this forward. And so maybe we ask them if 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, give them a range and ask them what would be helpful for them if they feel like, and the steering committee as well, they have the time they need.
Thank you. Marco.
Just real quick, instead of adding time to the process, can we add additional meetings in the same time frame? That'd be more my favorite approach, I think. I don't know. Who can I ask?
Well, I think our consultant is actually
Okay.
more paying.
Okay.
For the engineers in the room, I was taught about the 3-legged stool. Time,
Yeah, I know.
money, scope. I get to pick, you get to pick 2 of them,
Right.
but I get to pick the other one.
I've been in construction, I understand.
Okay, I'm just saying, extension is cool, more meetings is cool. The resources, it takes resources to do that. So that's my initial first reaction. I do think that we need to focus on one-on-ones. I do think we need to get in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, because we have not yet. And I do think that everyone needs to also recognize there's a very important layer here that we're not talking about. And that is the focus groups. We talked about it today. The focus groups are very important. We have 7 topical focus groups. One could be environmental, river, corridor overlay zones. They're very topical, and each focus group session has 9 to 10 people in the room, and it's having a conversation with people about the same topics that we're thinking about here tonight. So it's a more efficient way of doing one-on-ones. You put 5 or 7 to 8 people in a room based on topics, and you make sure you cross-pollinate those groups, so you're getting a good, diverse conversation. We've programmed that in this process, and that's an important step in the process.
And that's what's coming up.
That's what's coming up. So April 20th is our second major community event. We've done extensive, it's virtual, but it's been very successful so far. The community event's #1. And so we're doing multiple things above and beyond just the steering committee. But I do think we need to meet with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. May I, Mr. Mayor, quick, just to add-on thought?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I
mean, Counselor, sorry.
Well, that's what it is. Oh, you want to go?
Yes, Deborah always gets to go first. Go ahead.
Go first.
I was just going to say, if council does want us to change the scope at all, we'll talk with the consultant and we'll come back with cost implications for you all.
And I was just gonna say that being on the P and Z, going through some of these processes, and the last one was the 070 code update, and that was exactly that. It was rushed, and it felt rushed, and we made numerous mistakes being rushed. So I'm not saying we need to spend more money on it, but if there's any way, can we make longer meetings? Can we extend the meetings that are scheduled? Can we add a component where you guys have a smaller group discussion amongst the steering committee and actually voice your ideas and opinions and whatever, and then compile that as well. Just to get more info from the steering committee and everybody that wants to attend the steering committee. And from what I understand, the steering committees, are they open to the public? Yeah,
yeah.
so the public can show up, invite them, let them maybe talk.
Yeah, so is the nature of your motion to request that the consultant and staff come back to, let me finish, to council with a potential broadened scope? Not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more money, but a scope that allows for more public input at a slightly slower pace.
That sounds correct. I didn't make a motion, but I could. I wanted to see, I got you. I wanted to see what council feels about this first before we say that. But yes, Carl, thank you. Very nicely put.
Welcome to the council. Let's just move this along.
We play with live fire here, man. All right, there is a motion and a second. Counselor Dem made.
I so moved, but Carl Hanlon told me to move to. No, but yes, I agree with the motion.
So just to summarize for the probably Ike. The motion. Well, I want to make sure that when this is reported, it gets reported accurately. That the motion is to have staff bring back an expanded scope of work that doesn't necessarily reflect money. It could, but does reflect a longer time potentially. Is that about right?
I was more thinking actually not necessarily extending the entire process, but adding time within the.
I think the goal of the motion is to create more opportunities for input from both the steering committee and the public.
That's all.
The motion was to create more opportunities for input. Okay, and there's a second by Councilor Wusso?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some comments on that side.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Can I ask a question real quick as a point of order? I don't remember actually reducing the scope or the time. Did we do that? Did I vote for that?
You actually asked for some additional work to be done at the front end regarding growth management concepts, and that list of communities was described by Keith. That was actually what you guys asked for, and yes, you did vote for that.
But we didn't ask for there to be less meetings, less engagement.
No, I think what Keith was saying is that they, or Mark was saying is that they added some stuff to the beginning of this process, focused on that to get this information to you by next.
Okay, and is that, and I'm sorry, it's not part.
So that was actually an add to the scope, not a subtract from the scope.
And if that part is, okay, so if that's feeling rushed, I guess my question, I mean, I guess it's to you, James and Mark and everybody who feel like it might be rushed, or Jen. Do we know if I don't know if we know if the rest of the process will feel rushed or not, but just because that add on scope for, I think, $20,000. I don't know what I'm asking. Go ahead, Shelley.
Well, I think
I'm trying to
following your
quantify.
thread, and because we did hear tonight that some people are not being heard, or or maybe we haven't gotten to that stage yet to where you will really be heard well. But I do have confidence in the consultant that we've hired and the process that you went through to choose them, that they do comp plans across the state, and they've worked in our area, and that they have a process that they follow. Now, if we did do the ad service, I agree with Jonathan. I do not remember shortening the timeline or accelerating anything necessarily. So if that means we get if we've added some stuff up front, we get pushed back a little on the back end. In my mind, that doesn't change the original scope to where there would be additional funds involved. So I can support the motion. I'm not thinking that we would need to necessarily expand the scope right now, but I'd like to address the concerns of people not feeling heard. So how do we do that? And not-
I think that's kind of what the motion is doing. I mean, I think really fundamentally, it was just about making sure that we come back and clearly articulate people are going to have those opportunities to be heard. And if that needs to change, either, as Marco had said, either length of time in meetings or one-on-ones or something like that. And obviously we're conscious of the cost in terms of making sure that, the three-legged stool stays kind of with the legs that it
Right.
has.
Because we've already had an ad service for that additional scope that we added, but we're not really changing the rest. of
Right,
the
and I think
scope.
that's, I guess my feeling is we can't really do it on the fly, and so I understand what the goal was of council. I think the motion is clear enough on that, and we can take that and run with it and report back.
Good, Sean.
First of all, I disagree with most of what's been said at that end of the dais. We, as a council, are moving into what I consider to be micromanaging how this process works. I don't have the capability to tell Keith and Dave, sorry for Dave, how to do their job. It's not in my bailiwick. I don't know whether we need additional meetings. We need to increase the scope of the public input. There's been some communication issues that are clear. But for us up here to start redesigning the scope of what this project should be and what the job should be and how long it should take when we're 2 months into it essentially is bad policy on our part as a council. We need to decide, are we trusting the process that's going on? If they come back to us, or if we hear 4 months from now that this has gone too fast, there hasn't been enough time to get input, then we can still go out and expand and get more input. This is one of the most important decisions that I'm going to make in this council in the time I'm serving here. Is what is the 10-year plan for this community? I want to make sure that, and this is what I was going to make my motion earlier, is that we direct the consultant to gather as much public input as possible so that we make sure that when we make that decision, whether it be in August or September or December, that we make the decision based on community input. And we make the decision, making sure everyone's had the opportunity to get that input. If we're gonna start redesigning things up here at the council dais, we're gonna have meetings, we're gonna go every meeting at midnight because we're gonna be redesigning everything that comes in front of us. I know I'm embellishing, I know it's an overstatement, but I don't like what's happening up here tonight. So I'm gonna vote against this.
Yes, I will allow you to respond since it's kind of a directed at this side of the table. So
Right.
go ahead, respond. And then I have Tony. Tony, your hand was up. I see it's not anymore. Okay. And it'll come back to Shelley, who your mic was on.
Oh, it was, but that was from earlier.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then knock yourself out.
Oh, well, thank you.
Mine is on this one.
Yes. And then so is Marcus. But I don't know who's went on first. And
Doesn't
that's
matter.
my point.
Charlie, all I was gonna say is what I heard the same thing from Marco's proposal is what you just said. We're just looking for an opportunity to get more information from the public, and how do we do that? And allowing Deborah and Keith to figure that out. I'm not hearing something different.
We don't, how do we even know we need more input at this point? We have all these focus groups that are gonna come up, we're gonna start picking up this data. I don't want to shortchange anybody, but you guys are saying, let's go out and have more meetings, let's go out and do all this stuff. We don't even know if it's gonna be needed. That's my problem. That was the direction I heard from there, whether Carl repeated.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think what I was trying to get at was, and it may be that we come back and say, look, we think for right now, scope and process are fine. I think at the core of it was what you were asking for is really what, as I was teasing Marco about making the motion, really what that was about is this the right, is this the right amount? And it may be right now it totally is, and that may be what we report back in a couple of weeks. It may be that we say, there's some opportunities to expand some of this to make sure that the steering committee is and it may be at the request of the consultant that they think that there are some opportunities for more time. I think that's really what it's about. I didn't see it as you guys necessarily designing it so much as us coming back and saying, here are the opportunities if you want to expand and what that looks like.
Yeah, and so I'll just say that. Sorry. What I'll say is that I think that in quantifying, saying 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, what I should have said is more that I want the outcome of this to be thorough. I want people to feel heard. I want the consultants to not feel rushed. I want exactly what the purpose of this agenda item was, which is a comp plan update. And we heard some ways in which maybe it's not moving as smoothly as it could or should. We got feedback, we gave it to the consultants. And I think that what the goal of the motion was to pause, reflect, not try to figure it out up here, have staff, direct staff to look at some scenarios, maybe talk to some of these folks, stakeholders in this, and come back to us so that we can make the best decision with all the variables known. And that's what I think the goal of the motion was. And with that, I'd like to call the question.
I'd like to add one sentence.
Oh, sorry.
Or maybe
Sorry, I didn't
two.
mean to cut you off.
No worries.
Okay.
Charlie, I completely hear you. I'm not here to redesigning anything. I am just simply asking, can we add a few hours of discussion to some of these public outreaches? That's all I'm asking. I was actually part of the team that chose that consultant, and I'm impressed by you guys. That's why we chose you. I really enjoy how you guys do it. But I was also at the last steering committee meeting, and I felt I share your sentiments. I felt rushed, and I felt, wait a minute, you guys aren't listening, just because of some of the things that were on the board and some of the things you said. So I think we should ask to see if we can just discuss a little bit longer on the same day. I'm not asking to add time. Just the meetings are set. Can we extend them? Can we talk a little more?
Speaking about meetings getting extended, there is a request to call that question. I think that is very, very much in order. I'm sorry. So Ryan, let's call the question. And thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman, no. Counselor Hershey, no. Counselor Wusso, yes. Mayor Godus, yes. Counselor Dem, yes. Counselor Stepp, yes. Counselor Kaup, no. It passes 4-3.
All right, thank you. Appreciate all the input. Next item, airport board appointments.
Can I defer to Paula for that, Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, Tony?
Can I defer to Ms. Stepp for that, Mr. Mayor? I think it's pretty clear there. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Sean, but his name is Sean, and I don't have the document in front of me. But we have. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. I'm glad that I didn't have a mic. So the Airport Commission has an opening, and the opening is for a commissioner that is not within our city limits. And Sean Thomas has been an alternate for the last year. So I am suggesting, or I am proposing that we move Sean Thomas up into that position to fulfill that vacant position now on the Airport Commission. And I do understand there are some other people that have expressed some interest in the Airport Commission that I heard from at the airport listening session. So we may have somebody as an alternate in the future with some applications coming in.
And just to be clear, I don't know if it's you, Ryan, or you, Sarah, who is Sean Thomas the only one outside of city limits? I thought Richard Bach was outside city limits.
Richard is the one that is term limited out. I'm sorry, I should have said that. I
Thank you.
apologize. Yeah,
That's
no, I
helpful.
apologize.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're good. Okay, that's all. Is that a motion
That is a motion, please,
to approve Sean Thomas?
to approve Sean Thomas. Yes.
Been moved by Counselor Stepp, seconded by Counselor Cobb. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Tony Hershey voted in the affirmative as well. Motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you. Thank you, Sean, to Sean Thomas for volunteering again for that commission. All right, number 14, ordinance 2022-06, adoption of updated editions of building codes. This is the second reading. I believe on the first reading, never mind, I'm not gonna summarize. That's Jen.
Yes,
Ish.
somebody, not me.
Jen.
She's out.
Hey, Jen, you're up. Oh, so embarrassing. Hello, Jen.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I don't have a presentation on the building codes item, but I am open to any questions that you have. I do understand that there may be some questions about the timing. City staff is asking for the 90-day adoption. So there was some question about whether that question wanted to come back. And then there had been some public comments related to sprinkler systems. And the fire chief and the fire marshal are here and can potentially answer those questions, and I'm happy to as well.
I guess I would love to hear from the fire chief or fire marshal about their recommendation on this.
Nice try, Gary. Couldn't get it
Yeah.
out there.
Carrie.
Good evening, council. The sprinkler requirement for 1 and 2 family residences has been in the International Residential Code since sometime prior to 2009. And for years, we've taken an exception to that. Locally, the county, and a lot of municipalities. I think given the magnitude of the fires we're starting to see in recent years, obviously the most recent Marshall fire is where there was loss of life. I will be the first one to admit that a sprinkler system in a home is not designed to prevent that home from burning in the event of a conflagration or a wildfire, but it's there to protect lives, right? So I don't think it's wise for us to continue to kick the can down the road on what's considered a minimum requirement in many communities throughout our country and around the globe. So that's why I thought we would try to get council to go ahead and adopt the codes without exempting that sprinkler requirement. Cost of residential sprinklers is depending on total square footage in any number of factors. I can't give you a per square foot cost, but I've heard many people say it equates to about what you would spend on your granite countertop. So it's not a huge expense.
Oh,
Sorry.
so Gary, does it require an upsizing of the water line that serves the house?
In most, in 1 and 2 family
Mhm.
situations, I know that one of the questions referred to ADUs.
Right.
In most situations, a 3/4 inch service line is going to be more than sufficient to supply that. If it's a very large square footage, because it's a 2-head calculation, 2 sprinkler heads going off in the structure. Still, most, especially with our magnificent high-pressure water system here in Glenwood, a 3/4 service line is most of the time going to be sufficient.
So my other question was, we do have a memo from a local engineer that's asking to exempt small homes. We just adopted the tiny home. You know, would it make sense to exempt homes under a certain square footage? You know, just knowing that they'd be easy to exit. So I have another question also. but What do you
Okay,
think of that?
I think there probably is some rationale in a very small square footage home where travel distance out of the home might be less. But that's not the adopted standard, right?
Okay,
Um,
so it would be an
think
exemption.
think about a great deal of the other rental rooms that you find yourself in as you travel across the country. Really doesn't matter how tiny the room is, it still has a sprinkler head in it. So it would be one way, but I think it's another version of kicking the can down the road, if you will.
Okay, so my other question refers to the ADUs, because it sounds like if we're adding an ADU within the walls of an existing structure, then that does not need to be sprinkled.
That's
But
my
if someone
understanding.
has an existing home on their lot, say, and it has an old 3/4 inch line serving that existing home, if they wanted to add a freestanding ADU somewhere in the yard, can they tap into that existing
I don't know
3/4
whether
inch
we wanted
line,
to
or do
part-
they have to tap in a whole new service? Because that's a big cost increase.
I-
And we might be.
Yeah, I think, and Matt can answer as to the pressures. I think pragmatically, it's whether or not they want to have it on a separate service, right? If they want to have it separately metered, then they're going to pull a new line to that. If for whatever reason they want to do that. If it's going to be connected to the house, then it's on the same service. And I think Matt can speak to the pressure issue. I think it would be no different than a big house.
I have a great example. I have an ADU above my garage. It's actually attached to my house. We teed off the existing service line, ran over there, added a meter to that unit. So you can still work off the same 3/4 inch meter. It's generally enough for that size to be added to it.
Okay,
You know, when it comes to the pressures and was it 3/4 inch work or not, we have really high pressures in the city of Glenwood Springs. So most likely, as Chief said, it would function for a 1 or 2 head calculation, but you still have to do those calculations for the fire sprinkler design. Will do those calculations.
okay. And that's what I was wondering. Do we need an exception in our code that allows someone adding an ADU to do that?
So a lot of people have ADUs or some houses in the city that they have 1 meter for the entire house, including the ADUs, because they don't want to pay that other sewer fee.
Right.
So every time you add a meter, you have to pay an additional sewer fee associated with it. So some people kind of avoided that direction. I added another meter because I wanted it to be on their own system and their own situation, so we do pay that sewer fee. But there's nothing that says they can't tee off the existing service if it's on the same property, just to serve another building. It would be just, it's the exact same thing if it went into the house and came right back out of the house. It's the same water line, it's the same main source. It's the tap at the main that's really the conversation piece. of
Right,
what's
because
the
that's
pressure,
the
what's
big
the flow.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they can use it, then we're more than happy to let them tee off a bit and do a separate ADU. That's not a problem.
But I would add a slight caveat to that. You said old water lines.
Right.
There are a number of really old homes in Glenwood that probably have really old water services. Those over time have probably become incapable, which is why if you require a sprinkler in an ATU and behind that house or above the garage or whatever, the engineers would have to do a flow test and calculate, and that might necessitate. So I can't say with certainty that 3/4 service lines are always going to be sufficient.
Okay, but it's not an automatic that they have to do a new tap for an ADU. Okay.
Can I do a follow-up to that? Gary, into that circumstance, I got an old house. And I'm gonna put a ADU unit behind it, gonna convert my garage to an ADU unit. And my line that can't carry the pressure, I can replace the line, I don't have to pay a new tap.
Right, you don't have to have a new tap.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the line may need to be replaced all the way to the curb stop as opposed, or all the way to the corp, all the way to the main instead of just to your property.
I think that's why I try to answer that question. There's so many different situations.
Right.
Line, it crusted, now it's a 5/8 inch line, quarter, you just have to do those flow tests and make sure that we'll help. You can do that in advance of making that decision. It's pretty easy to do at your home. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh.
Carrie, I'm not sure, this is a question for you, for Jen, or Carl. So here's my dilemma is we need affordable housing. We need housing. We need people, places people can build. And I know we talked about, if people are building and there's deed restricted, they're not, they wouldn't be required to have this. Am I mixing up my two different things? They would be required to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way like fees or something, fee waivers or something that we could use to kind of support this push for affordable housing? I'm thinking back to right now, and I've been reading about the Marshall Fire, and all these people are replacing their homes, and they've got all these requirements now for solar panels and sprinklers, and the cost of housing is something they can't even afford to rebuild their house. And we're facing this dilemma in this town. We can't build homes for people to buy. And so I'm just kind of like,
So if I may, I think
You gotta-
that's probably a policy decision for us.
I'm just wondering if there's waivers or something.
It's probably not for Gary necessarily.
That's why I said Jen.
And yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that, but I think we can do whatever we want. We can waive all of those fees if we so choose. I mean, there's gonna be obviously costs to that, but
Okay, that's why I kind of put it to Jen.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I said,
sorry.
I wasn't sure if this was a Jen question or, because I think this is a good thing. I'm just trying to figure out how do we accommodate that opposite thing.
And, it's difficult. There is a cost to having these sprinkler systems. But what's the cost of a life?
Right.
And we want people to be safe. And climate change is now, and looking at Marshall, it is really hard to look at 1,000 homes that burned. And there were 2 people who died, and maybe one of those, the person who's outside, it wouldn't have made a difference. But there's somebody who died in a house, and maybe it would have made a difference. So I hear the question. I'm certain there is a way that we can add some sort of fee waiver, but I think we really think that it's important to do this.
Okay. And I appreciate, like I said, I know this is really important. I'm just trying to think also on that other side of things. When I look at $18,000 for a 3,000 square foot home, I'm like, okay. I'm in the realm of that kind of home. Not a 20,000 square foot home.
And I will say that I certainly know people on the Front Range who lost homes,
Yeah.
who are making very tough decisions about what they will do moving forward. I think a lot of that $100 a foot increase is a net zero kind of calculation. Certainly some part of that is the increase from the time that their home was built to the time now. There are increases in those building codes, absolutely. I do think that the really, well, it's both the supply chain issue. So there's also some of those things that are related to the cost of lumber, the cost of, other materials. But I do think that what my understanding is that the net zero piece kind of makes that number really
Right.
increase on the Front Range.
Right. Okay. Well, it's something for us, I guess, to consider as council, but thank you, Gary. And I do understand the importance of this. I'm just looking at the other side.
Questions?
Oh gosh, we're supposed to be at questions.
It's a question mode, yeah.
We're in
Sorry.
question mode. I got comments, so.
I do too. Any other questions for Gary or Jen or staff? Okay, we'll open up to public comment. Yes, sir in the black hat.
My name's Glenn McKenna. I'm a resident of Glenwood. I'm a realtor and a GC. And I did meet with the fire marshal on a property in Glenwood this week. I heard you speak earlier about new homes, but then we progressed to existing ADUs or even retrofits of ADUs.
Hey, Glenn, could you address us? I'm sorry, just so the mic picks you up.
Sure. And we migrated to ADUs, building ADUs and retrofitting an ADU in an existing home. So I'm a little confused. Is the code applicable only to new construction that you're talking about?
I believe that all of this is with regard to new construction. If it's a modification of an existing building, this sprinkler code and even some of the other energy codes would not apply to that construction.
Thank you, Glenn. Didn't recognize you without the white hat. I saw your sign on Midland Avenue, so.
That's another.
Anybody else in the public have a comment on this? All right, I'll bring it back to council for comments and or motion. Go ahead.
Go ahead
Shut
and
it.
make a motion if I can to approve ordinance 2022-06 for the adoption of the 2021 building codes.
And I'll
Second.
Tony got.
Let's let Tony do it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to second just one, Don.
All right, it's been moved by Shelley, Counselor Cobb, seconded by Counselor Hershey. Further discussion? I'll throw a couple of 2 cents in. I think that how do you vote against something when someone says, "Well, how do you put a price on a life?" I don't know how you do it, but the insurance company and actuary tables do it all the time. So you can. I don't know that, in a small town, it's the best thing to do. But to what end, and I'm serious about this, is what end are we going to take this? Because no one in the Marshall Fire is going to survive if they had a sprinkler system. No one in a fast moving inferno, an interior sprinkler system is going to save that. I think that, if we're talking about exterior fire suppression, if we're talking about a program where we cut back brush and things like that, then yes. But I've lived here almost 20 years and I don't recall anybody in this town dying in a structure fire. Now, there might be some that I'm not aware of, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that when we do have to balance the cost, sometimes the really high cost of what our other goals are, which is affordable housing, and making this a community that people can still afford to live in. Because if everything has to be sprinkled, then do we have to have everything made of asbestos? And do we have to have all houses cinder block and Spanish tile? I mean, where does this end? Because at any point, somebody can throw down the trump card of what's a life worth? And it's a horrible question. And so I don't know that I can vote against it, but I think it's just this is a huge expense. It's going to really cut into the ability for people, for homeowners to have what are by nature with these ADUs affordable housing. And I think it severely compromises our goals of infill density and affordable housing, especially in tiny homes. And I guess I would, since I know it's going to pass because no one's going to vote against this, I would ask maybe for a friendly amendment to exempt tiny homes of 400 feet or under, only because a lot of these times, these type of houses are mobile. They're on wheels. They are meant sometimes to be taken and put someplace or picked up and put back on flatbeds and taken to other places. I think to require a sprinkler of a 400 foot, a 400 foot doesn't have a bedroom. It's going to be a studio. So I'll channel Mayor Steve Davis and say, I hate this. I think that it compromises. I love it. Listen, I love saving lives. Don't get me wrong. But if somebody would give a friendly amendment to exempt 400 square feet, I would vote for it.
I'm just wondering, I would almost prefer to find a way to incentivize the cost of that extra, because I think from what's been presented, it's fairly minimal. So I think one of the numbers I saw was $6 a square foot on 400 square feet. It's not a huge cost when you talk about a life or a project like that. So I would rather, at this point, not, but I like the idea of talking about exemptions for possibly ADUs, since we restrict that to local tenancy and long-term tenancy. They can't be a VRBO, but or affordable housing, but that's a policy thing I'd rather discuss later.
Sure.
Is that?
No, that's absolutely fine. Whoa, I see everybody's thing lit up. I have no idea who's in turn. I don't want to offend anybody. Ingrid.
Okay. Keep doing it wrong. Sorry. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. I think on this one, it always weighs so heavily on a decision when Chief Tillison or any of our professionals come in and give us guidance on what they believe is best for their community, especially when their industry is in saving lives. So that weighs heavily. Thank you so much for that. In my industry, I understand the added cost, but the reality is in the world that we live in, anybody building a single family home in Glenwood is facing $400 to $500 per square foot cost. That means that a 2,000 square foot home is beyond affordable, which means that if you need to add in the cost of granite countertops, it's probably in your budget. So with that in mind, I am comfortably moving forward on this. Had there been a requirement that ADUs in the home require it, then I would not have been able to support it. we have such a nominal amount of freestanding ADUs that are built in this town because of circumstances, small lots, setbacks, etc. If those people want to come to us and ask for a variance, I would be receptive. I think we can encourage community development to, verbally convey that, and they could come to us and they could ask for a requirement or an exception, but I think it would probably fall under health and safety. Marco and I just looked at each other and did a nonverbal. So that would be the one thing that I would potentially say, but otherwise I will be supporting this motion.
You guys are in Russell.
I don't care.
Charlie.
My question is, can we build tiny homes in Glenwood? Do we have a process to build tiny homes? I can't remember.
We just,
The minimum square footage for a house in Glenwood is 300 square feet.
Okay. So it
Yeah,
can't be
and
done.
we do, and there is, I think this set of amendments includes essentially the tiny home
That's what I kinda
regulations.
remembered. I was just trying to remember if I remembered
Right,
that
no,
correctly.
absolutely, and I don't want to offer everybody, but there actually is a fee waiver provision for sprinklering in the code currently, so.
And otherwise I just echo what Ingrid said.
Jeff reminded me because I had forgotten because I'm old,
I can bring it up if you guys want to see it.
Just real quick, I do the same thing Ingrid did. Turn it up. Our ADUs are 850 square feet, right? That's our max. That's what,
You changed 1,000.
Yeah.
I thought that was only in-house. Okay. It's all, okay, excellent. So we're looking at $6,000. I can attest that $6 will cover your sprinkler systems. I put one in and that's exactly what I paid. So I am never in favor or hardly ever in favor of increasing construction costs. But saving lives I'm in favor of. So I think we should do this. I also like what you said with the policy that we could do a fee waiver or help. And also I might be in favor of mobile tiny homes exempt because not sure it makes sense to have a sprinkler line coming out of the ground exposed, trying to save lives for it's a tiny home comes.
Where's the water coming from to drink in the tiny home?
Yeah, but okay, so okay. No. Yeah, good point.
She made me do it.
But if the water pipe froze and you can't drink, you're gonna live. If the water pipe froze and it's not extinct fire, you're not gonna live. So a little bit of a concern there, but anyway. So I think that's something to discuss later. So anyway, that's all I got.
All right, let's, Tony, I don't see your hand because I think there's a presentation up, but. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
What did you need, Mr. Mayor? I'm sorry.
No, I just was wondering if you had any questions or had any.
No, I seconded the motion. I support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Gary, I was actually serious, like, how many people, and I'm not trying to use this as advancement of my argument.
It's right there.
How many people have we had perish in structure fires in the last, like, say, 20 years?
How many do we want to perish in structure fires in the next? None. So there's your answer, Mr. Mayor.
I'm asking the.
I know in my nearly 30 years here, that we had two, I'm sure of maybe three that actually perished in the instruction.
Okay. Let's call the question.
Who made the motion?
Shelley made the motion, seconded by Councilor Hershey.
Okay. We're waiting on one.
Oh,
Yes.
I was going to this thing where I was in my mind thinking tiny home village and would that qualify as like a commercial or like.
It's unanimous.
I was like there.
It was unanimous, Ike. All right, now moving on, please. Item number 15. Actually, can I take a quick temperature? Can we continue public art funding? Item number 16. Why? Because, well, we still have this matters of state interest, ward redistricting, which might not be a short conversation, a presentation for community broadband.
We do have a member of our Arts and Culture Board here.
Oh, okay, okay,
I thought that was Leviticus because they were good.
okay. All right, matters of state interest.
I'm sorry. can you say-
Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here we'll take a 6-minute break, come back, gavel us back in at 8:10.
Thank you.
That's free.
I'd like to eat. I am.
15. Second reading. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the second reading on adoption of what is shorthand 1041 powers. At the conclusion of the hearing on the last time around, you guys had asked for a couple of questions and a couple of changes. One of those changes was to include all of the Highway 82 corridor, which that modification you will have noted, it has been made. Councilor Willman also asked for us to take a look at kind of the view shed, natural hazards outside city limits question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. But we did take a look at that. Probably the other question that's hanging out there is really kind of how it may interact with some of RAFTA's facilities. And the reality is some of those are going to be very fact specific inquiries on what gets triggered or what doesn't. And I do know that I think we're going to be probably meeting with RAFTA to talk through a variety of projects and for a variety of reasons in the near future. The one that I think I did not have a chance to fully vet with Bill Mullins, just in terms of connecting sort of how it might interact with the rail corridor. But, you know, from my basic sort of research and understanding regarding rail banking and that corridor and what it was originally used for, we're really working from the standpoint that more than likely anything that is not a reactivation of heavy rail, which is what the underlying use was, would likely need to go through would need to be evaluated whether it would trigger the process or not. I don't think there's an automatic exemption. Keeping in mind in all of this is that, you know, it doesn't necessarily make it worse or prevent it. It provides a meaningful opportunity for public input and the potential to mitigate impacts to the community. And so I think from that standpoint, sometimes it is 1041 reviews are viewed as a negative. It doesn't necessarily have to be used that way. And as with so many things in Glenwood, I think oftentimes we do it kind of in a more customer friendly way than maybe people are used to dealing with it in, say, Pitkin County. And so that's kind of our goal here, particularly when you look at the exemption list of, you know, major applications that would be going through a process anyway. We're not trying to add another layer. We're trying to capture those things that are going to have an impact, but wouldn't otherwise be reviewed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, the only substantive change is the inclusion of the rest of the Highway 82 corridor. Any questions?
Just for the record, this is a public hearing.
Yes. Yes, sorry.
We had this discussion.
We're right. Yeah. Sorry. This is the statutory public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no questions, I'll turn it to the public for that public hearing. Any comments from the public, either online or in person? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah.
Could you press your?
Oh, thanks. I move for the approval of ordinance 2022-09, amending Title 7, Ed Guides and Regulations for matters of state interest, second reading, planning item 02-22.
Second motion.
Been motion by Councilor Willman, seconded by Councilor Cobb. Ryan, let's call the question.
It passes unanimous.
All right.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Unanimous.
Item number 16. This is public arts funding, and I'm sorry, sir, that I tried to cut you off. His name? Kyle. Sorry, Kyle. You don't just like showing up to meetings for 2 hours and then getting sent home. It's weird.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm here tonight actually on behalf of the Parks and Recreation and Arts part of the organization, but really on behalf of economic development. So why public art? I just wanted to start there. We support public art because it provides access to art for all people, activates public and underused spaces, grows civic pride and connection to the community, supports artists, including local artists, adds human scale to larger spaces, invites experiences and interactivity for people walking, and illustrates or reflects the story or history of the space and improves wayfinding. And that is information from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. From the public art plan, the Arts and Culture Board really feels like it's integral to the vibrancy of the city, and it's important to economic vitality. So here's some pictures of some public art in Glenwood Springs and across the region, and a picture from Austin. And I put this one of me for the Buffs in the room. So go Buffs.
Yeah.
So there are more than 40 public art programs across Colorado, according to the Office of AWEDIT. Some of those are funded by 1% of capital improvement projects. And this is just kind of a grouping of those other area communities that do fund public art through a 1%. There are other methods for public art funding, but here are some local and regional examples. So what does ordinance 2022-07 do? It's an implementation tool for the public art plan that you adopted last year. It establishes a definition for public art, the need for a public art acquisition account, defines the relationship between the public art program and the Arts and Culture Board, establishes that we would set aside 1% of publicly funded capital improvement projects for public art, changes the land use code to include financial exactions from private developers for public art for certain projects, and then sets that there could be a fee in lieu paid, and kind of again just defines those relationships. So I did want to take this opportunity to provide a little bit of introduction to Annie Henninger. If you haven't met her, she's our art supervisor, and we can get you this introduction letter. Actually, I think you have it in the information that Brian provided in the January update that he gave you all. But we're excited to have Annie on board. A little bit more about the program. What capital improvement projects would be subject to the 1%? City Council would annually set aside 1% of publicly funded capital improvement projects, including roads, streetscape projects, fire and police stations, parks, city facilities, and utility projects where there is a visual element of the project above the ground, but it excludes road maintenance and also the South Bridge project. Private development. The new development subject to the common open space requirements within section 70-40-40 of the land use code would provide public art through on-site artwork, cash in lieu or combination. And we would exclude, as it's written, as it's proposed, it would exclude affordable households earning no more than 100% of AMI. So if you had a project where some of the units were deed restricted, it would exclude the square footage for those. Projects subject to the common open space requirements. There's some applicability here. This is just taken from the section of the code. Not all of these would have a square footage component. So highlighting here, major subdivision or minor subdivision plat approval, major subdivision preliminary plat approval, it would only really kick in if you had square footages. So your major site architectural plan approval, minor site architectural plan approval, and administrative site architectural plan approvals. It does exempt properties that are located within the M2 zoning district, and then also single family detached or duplex.
Casey, where are you going?
And then changes to Title 70 require you to consider whether and to what extent that the new language in the code is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other city policies, does not conflict with other provisions of this code or other provisions of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code, is necessary to address a demonstrated community need, necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions in our policy and are consistent with the general purpose and intent of this code. And with that, I am open to any questions that you have. There is a member of the Arts and Culture Board who's here, and as is Brian.
Questions?
Please. Jen, on the one part I'm a little bit confused on is the 1% from capital projects. what's the timing on that? Because a lot of times in the budget, we approve, we're gonna do these capital projects, and then half of them, 3/4 of them, a quarter of them get rolled over to the next year, nothing gets started. I'm like, are we saying at January 1st, anything that's a capital improvement project has a 1% deduction? Or is it like, oh, we're starting on this I don't know, lift station, whatever we're starting on. Now we need to also assign 1% of that. How does that kind of work? I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
So I think that there's probably lots of different ways that we can do that with the budgeting process. What you see a lot is that 1% kind of gets allocated toward that project. So in the example of your 6th Street project, we are already planning for there to be art pedestals for us to do some moving of some art that we already have that's in our collection that's could be better placed. And then thinking that there would be a commissioning of some art that would be associated with that project. So it would be kind of the 1% of that project. That is the amount that we would spend toward the art in the 6th Street project. But you certainly could be something that's just an added line item in the budget that is, on all capital that met the criteria. And then you could just, you would have that in the budget. Could be project-based, could be in the specific funds themselves. And I don't know if the finance director has a preference.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get a sense of, like I said, we roll projects over year to year and that type of stuff. And, we put it, is it like, okay, we've started the 6th Street project and now that funding will be applied? Or is it at the beginning of the year, you have so much money, and maybe that's a different question. So I would, well, I'm trying to get a sense of where we're going to see this money flow out and when.
I would anticipate it would be something that we might have as a reserve line, or maybe we would just take it out of reserve line that we have, when we know the project is going to move forward.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be one of the things that we budget again and again and again.
Okay. So timing along about when we think the project is moving forward. Okay.
I would
That's what
think so.
needed to see. Thank you.
Charlie, questions?
Yeah, I kind of follow up to what Paula was saying, in the physical impact in the staff report, you say, well, we have $28 million in capital projects, and that would be $280,000. What are we projecting? I think this is a great project, and I think we should support it from the city projects as well, but what do we need overall for public art over the next 10 years? Because $280,000, maybe I just don't understand the cost, but it seems like a lot of money, to be putting into public art. It's going to come out of some other source, some other thing that we can't do in a capital project.
So what we did on the private exaction side, development side, was we looked at Carbondale and looked at Lafayette that have rotating exhibits. We tried to look at Grand Junction, but they, for the last couple of years, have not had their rotating exhibit. Looked at the cost of those pieces and then averaged the cost. And then we said, we think that we'd like to do 5 of those a year. And so that was kind of the number that we were chasing.
Well, how much would 5 a year cost?
So, in that paradigm, we said it was $60,000. So that the average of those pieces that are on loan are about $12,000. And so that is how we arrived at that. Then we took that number and we spread it out over projects that were, would have been required if this were in place to provide public art. So that's how we got to that. So it's $60,000 and 5 pieces at $12,000 a piece. I will say that the piece that we did for the NEA grant that we got for the North Landing, we spent $37,000 on that.
I'm sorry,
piece.
how much?
We spent $37,000 on that piece. It's probably worth more like 80. So I think she did it at a discount. Because I think she wanted to do the project, most of her pieces are in that kind of that range of cost. And that's, I think, what we have it as on our on the insurance list is what I think she said 80 is what we have it listed at. So the cost of those pieces can be, very expensive. It depends on the scale of those installations. There's a project that is on the entrance to Longmont, and it was done a number of years ago, probably in the 2004, 2005 timeframe. And my recollection was that was a $250,000.
Did you look at any of the potential source of funding public art other than doing this type of a fee?
You know, at this time, I think that what is recommended in the master plan that was adopted was a 1% capital improvement fee and a 1% on developers. That process went through the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission thought that that was extremely high, and it could compete with some of those other impact fees that we charge, you know, in the tunes of, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so this is a much smaller number. Of course, I think the Arts and Culture Board and the Parks and Recreation Director would love to have more money to do these projects. And I know that, you know, Terry even is very excited about the possibility of being able to incorporate these into projects, because I mean, she talks about one of the projects that gives her the, you know, that she had the most positive response to is the little kind of little pocket park that's at 3 Mile. And it's just because it has this, I don't remember the exact words that she used, but it, you know, it really made an impact on people. So the ability to have this public art incorporated into these projects can have a big impact on the built environment.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, we'll turn it over to the public for public comment. Kyle, you're up.
Ethan.
Ethan.
I'm not Kyle Jones.
It's so her fault.
It's so my fault.
Hello, I'm Ethan Merritt. I'm a member of the Arts and Culture Board. And just a friendly reminder, as brick and mortar binds buildings, so do the arts bind people together. It is the spirit, is the ether that all connects us and inspires us. It hopes and dreams and everything can be in the art and shared public places. That is the intent of the art plan and the mechanisms that we've set forth. So this is just one step further in the process. So thank you for your continued support. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ethan. And thank you for your service on the Arts Commission Board. Awesome. All right, I'll bring it back for comments and or emotion. Councilor Cobb.
I'll make a few comments before I make a motion, and I apologize, Ethan. And I would like to say that the Arts and Culture Board has worked on the arts plan for over 1.5 years, I think, Brian, because it started and it went through COVID. You know, it was a long process. Everything had to go online. But they have a fantastic plan put together. And as we know, you can't further arts in Glenwood Springs, and really what the plan is designed to do is elevate the arts in Glenwood Springs, raise awareness, and also elevate it to the point where it actually has an economic benefit for the city also, as well as a cultural benefit. And that can't be done without funding. So I think going through the P&Z process, that the funding has been brought down to a level where it's not an overburden on developers, but we are asking developers to put back up certain size projects, not small projects, but larger projects to give back to the community, as well as our own public projects. And I'd just like to read a little bit from the American for the Arts, did a study on arts and economic prosperity. And so they based on the study, apparently arts generate over 166 billion in economic activity annually across the United States, provides 5.7 million full-time jobs in the US, and generates nearly 30 billion in revenue for federal, state, and local governments a year, where the governments spend less than 4 billion annually. So that's almost a 7-to-1 return on investment into the economy, coming back through, you know, attraction to the community for arts and just robust activity around the arts. So based on that, I support this, and I would ask council to support this ordinance, and I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-07 for funding and the findings. In the staff report, along with findings in the staff report, for changes to Title 070 and 090 related to public art funding planning item 57-21. Have to read the funding.
Okay, I guess I second it.
Been motioned by Counselor Kopp, seconded by Counselor not Davis.
No.
Damn. I thought he did David.
Marco, that's fine.
I'll make a comment if that's okay. I think that, I don't know, I'm kind of curious how many lives would be lost if we don't do this. But this is one of those, like, I totally support this. I love communities that there's public art. I don't know that government has the role to provide public art. I think in a lot of communities, it is art councils, it's an art community that comes together. I think I would absolutely support this if we just hadn't made construction costs $5 a square foot more expensive. I'm serious. I think $6, excuse me. Thank you. Oh, even more. It's tough because I do support this. I think it's a good idea, but we're making construction costs higher and higher, one paper cut at a time. And I feel like I should be sitting over here in Counselor Davis's seat because I feel like I'm channeling him. But you know, when we look at all the things, the priorities in this community, housing, childcare, mental health, like next week, why won't there be the Early Childhood Network asking us for a 2% impact fee extraction on development for childcare? And how can we not say childcare is at least twice as important as art? And then somebody else a couple weeks later will say, well, what about a 4% extraction? And these paper cuts keep coming and coming and coming and making housing more and more. And so yes, at some point we're gonna live in a beautiful town with great public art and amazingly sprinkled houses that are for second homeowners, because we won't be able to have people that can afford to live here. And they will be visiting here and they will be coming from Parachute to clean these houses that are well sprinkled and walk by great places of public art. But I totally support this. That's the thing. I love this. I absolutely love this. I just think that I'm a little burnt from, I don't mean that luckily. I want to look at, you know, what are our priorities? And if we're going to put additional costs on builders, developers, and those are the big bad guys, but even people have ADUs, and we're gonna add these costs to every little thing. Let's talk about what our highest priorities are in the community. Personally, I think childcare is the higher priority. I think we've heard from citizens about that and of affordable housing. So if we're going to start making things more expensive, let's make them more expensive for the things that we have all heard and have expressed are higher priorities. So for that reason, if this was earlier in the agenda, I probably would have supported it, but for that reason, I probably can't support it now. Go ahead, Marco.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. That was very informative, actually. No, I liked it. It's interesting, but I'm all for it. I have a sweet spot for the arts, and I'm a little bit bummed that we don't have more of a comprehensive master plan for all arts, not just the public arts, but also performing arts, visual arts, you name it, all kinds of arts. Why? How come we don't have this? And I understand we like to do things in bits and pieces. This is a bit and piece to the big picture. So totally support it, but I wish it was more of a comprehensive master plan for all arts with the correct funding, because then we're covering more than just the public art. I hear you. I can't raise you.
Hey, Ingrid.
You just took me so.
I need to not touch it. I want two buttons, one that says I want to talk and then the other one that turns it on when I'm ready. I'm going to be supporting this, and I think the rationale behind it is that even a few years now since we've integrated the butterflies into our community, I see them on Facebook. I see people who come to visit. They say to me that they're interactive. They help people connect with our town and make memories here. And that's our goal, is a tourist-based town that, you know, so much of our sales tax is generated from that. having memories made here is that the impetus for another trip back to Glenwood. And so, you know, when I step back and see that, I can say that not only is it beautification, which a developer may not be inclined to do. Someone who builds 300 condos or town, you know, apartments may not automatically be inclined to give back to the community because they feel like they've already checked the box with just providing housing. So I am inclined to support it for that. I also believe that art has the way to convey message. And I want to use the example of Chris Erickson, who's an artist in Carbondale, who did a melting gondola for Aspen Ski Co. And it made it into the Washington Post as a story for, you know, the climate change that we currently are living through. It conveyed a message. And I think that if we have a master plan for art and we have a community filled with creative individuals, we too can teach through art. And I think it's a medium that people are really receptive and appreciate. So I absolutely will be supporting this. I do agree that it is an impact, but I think the impact is on people who I'm just going to counter Jonathan. These are people who are automatically going to have to put sprinkler systems in their projects anyways, Jonathan. So it did not increase their costs. So I'm sorry, but I just discounted everything you said.
Well, the ADUs won't be paid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this isn't a cost for additional cost for development then?
They are kind of large projects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Only large projects that have community.
It's low cost.
Yes.
Okay.
Call the question.
I agree, Mr. Mayor, with what you said about the funding and potentially increasing costs. On the other hand, I think this is an important project for our community. I think public art is part of the tourism thing that we're trying to create. And I agree with what Ingrid said about the wings and what they've done for the community. I'm hoping we can look for alternate sources of revenue, and I have some ideas, but I'll hold those for some other time, but I'm going to support this tonight.
Okay, I can count to 4. Ryan, let's call the question. Right.
Yes.
Counselor Kaup, yes. Counselor Stepp, yes. Counselor Dem, yes. Mayor Godus, no. Counselor Wusso, yes. Counselor Hershey, no. Mayor Pro Tem Willman, yes. It passes 5-2.
And thank your identical brother, Kyle. Very confusing.
Excited to wear a name tag.
All right. Ordinance number 17, 2022-12, board redistricting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did some work on this work session, received some input regarding potentially redrawing some of the districts, in particular Charlie and Paula's districts, or wards rather. So they went over to geographic boundaries. You'll see a couple of the 3 maps that are in your packet. The first is what originally was submitted, which is reflective of the census blocks strictly. The next 2 reflect really the only difference between the next 2 are where the terraces are, whether they're in Jonathan's ward or in Marco's ward. If you're inclined to go without the census blocks, and honestly, from an election standpoint, as long as we know the addresses, that works for us. If you're inclined to go with the geographic boundaries, I would likely be, Ingrid asked me to give some thoughts on if I had a recommendation or not. It would probably be the one that puts the terraces into Marco's ward. It gets our numbers a little closer. I do recognize that we are going to see an increase in population, as well as hopefully voters out at the lofts and potentially BLD. I think that coming online and really multifamily doesn't oftentimes produce as many voters as people. because they tend to be a little more transitory and sorting those things out. That would probably be the map that I would suggest. Option 3, I'm sorry. And they're not labeled. It's the one that I'm talking about that I think balances the geography along with the numbers the best is the one. And that's where I always lose track of which one they are. So I'm just referring to where, because I can tell where the terraces are, and it puts the terraces in Marco's ward. It's number 3, I think. It's draft 3.
Question, Carl. So just so I'm clear, the numbers, the population, the voters are based on the 2020 census.
Yes.
And it does not include, like, for example, phase 3 or 4 of the lofts, or potentially the approved BLD.
Right. It does not.
So BL.
Right. So the voter numbers are based on the last registered voters in the last election this fall. So those registered voter numbers that's who voted in that election. So that's where the voter numbers are coming from. The population numbers are based on the census.
So is it, and this is legitimately a question, I'm not trying to frame it in the form of whatever, we have another, and Jen or Hannah can help me out, we have another 450 potential apartments coming online with lost phase 3 and 4 and BLD-ish? Okay. So assuming, spitballing here, 2 people per apartment, that's 900 people. And I don't know if BLD is breaking ground or not, but I do know, 150 units are either out of the ground or about out of the ground with loft phase 3 and 4. So I just worry that this is going to be so, by our next election, this is going to be really disproportionate. And I guess, yeah, I won't make a comment, but I just worry that there's nothing like that in my ward. Like,
Yeah, no, and that's why I was saying, in the moment, as of today, I think option 3 best reflects and balances all of those questions and possibilities. 5 years from now, I'm not, that may look different. So that's why we put 3 different maps in for you guys to work off of. Like I said, the reason I was saying 3 is just in the moment for the next municipal election, it would be the most balanced map that you would put together.
Just another quick question. How close are those 100 loft units from being occupied? Do we know? Okay. Not by the next election?
How soon do you think those last 100 loft units will be finished?
I don't know. I mean, generally, the construction of that size and scale takes about 18 months. And, a lot of that project is, the lofts 3 is, it's substantially vertical. I don't know exactly when they are planned to finish, but lofts 4 and BLD are included in that number that was in your staff report. So neither of those have come all the way through the process with building permits and that kind of thing. I think Lost 4 has final plans, but not building permits. They're like a week away. So assume that those 36 units would come online probably in 18 months.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, it's a ordinance. It is an ordinance. I'll open it now to the public for public comment. I know the public is very interested in this.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question, Tony? Thank you, everybody. Did you have a question, Tony? No. Okay, your hand's up on the screen. Do you have a
I got
question?
it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I guess I'll bring it back now for comments. I guess I'll just make the comment that I think that by the next election, in April, we'll probably have lost phase 3 up. And I think certainly by the next election after that, Marco's ward will be significantly larger than my ward. So that's why I'd be supportive of Ward 2, but draft 2, yeah. But it's not a huge thing to me either.
Can this be adjusted anytime?
No.
Let me do a follow-up on that.
I'm sorry, and it just that was for the public. Marco and I have worked together for like 15 years, so there's a reason why I'm so. I'm not usually that disrespectful. To kind of okay, fine. So the charter contemplates ward redistricting after every census. But it needs to be completed at least a year ahead of the next municipal election. So that's why this is kind of your one shot at redistricting. The mayor raises frankly some really good observations. But it's literally, I was going to comment that this is one of those, the Supreme Court has even acknowledged redistricting is purely a political question. So it's all up to you guys.
I guess I'll just make a motion to adopt draft 2 for the word redistricting. Okay.
Second.
Oh, sorry, Tony, I already did, but
Sorry, I didn't hear you. You guys got to be closer to the mics, Alyssa said, please. Thank you.
That's.
Oh, you gotta turn it on.
sorry,
Yeah.
Tony, if you want to second it.
Yeah,
No, go ahead, Paula. I just couldn't hear you because your mic was on.
Tony, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been moved by myself, seconded by Paula. Further comments? I would, yes.
So I've looked at the registered voters and anyways, in the lofts, I believe we've only had a handful of voters actually be registered in there from the time from 2018 to now. So if that means anything, yeah.
Makes me wonder what the population of the lots are. Are they new people?
Well, the developer has told us they're all teachers and nurses.
What I would say is that something in kind of working on the political side of things is that multifamily, because it tends to be more transitional, oftentimes, people are still voting in the last place they live, not the place they live now, just because of the way ballots chase you around. So
That was gonna be my one comment, is that ward and also the meadows and the lofts and everything that's being built over there has the proclivity towards not having a lot of registered voters. They're more transient people. And so with that in mind, you already have 2009 people in your ward with 1,200 registered voters, whereas Ward 1 currently only has 1,600 population. That's our current numbers. So I will not be supporting this. I actually am in alignment with our legal counsel that says that the third iteration is probably the most balanced, but whatever the will of council is, I'm fine with it.
Can I ask a question before we vote? And that's, is there any sense that Lofts is a new development? It's kind of a new part of town that's becoming more residential. Is there any sense that voter registration level can change?
yeah, I think it can. I think that's really up to frankly the parties, and as they work through these elections on going out and getting registered voters. So like I said, this is just, there's no perfect answer here, honestly. So
Logic makes sense that it's a growing area.
right. Yeah, I'm confident the population is going to be there. I have no idea on voter registration. And recognizing that while you guys are elected from a ward, we don't, other than your election, that's the only time that those wards have a tremendous amount of meaning. And we've always been fortunate that this council historically has thought about not only their ward, but the entire town.
I have a question. Carlo, if we decide somewhere in the next year that we're going to elect a mayor and do
That would be a complete change to the charter. So the draft language that I would use would just sort of override this to change all of that. Right.
We would be looking at the populations in whatever. wards
We're-
it is.
Right, and whatever was created at that time. Let's call the question.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman, no. Counselor Hershey, yes. Counselor Wuso, no. Mayor Godus, yes. Counselor Dem, yes. Counselor Step, yes. Counselor Kaup, yes. It passes 5-2.
Thank you, council. The last time that was done was in 2001.
Well, and I would encourage the new residents of our town.
When Shelley was in high school.
Oh, I would just encourage the new residents of our towns, be it in of our city in the Lofts or Six Canyons or wherever, to register to get to vote and take part in your community governing.
All right, thank you. Item number 18, community broadband fiber to home project update.
One moment, I have to join as a panelist and do some sharing here. Appreciate it.
This is when you're gonna tell me we're gonna get broadband in our neighborhood, right?
Very-
You don't have broadband?
You can
Oh,
ask
so
Michael
great.
that. He's also getting.
That is so.
Oh, so amazing.
great. You guys are lucky.
Michael, you talk about this? I'm going to talk about some of it. Michael's going to pick up the last two slides and he's going to be on for answering questions like, when is it going to be at my house? Which is generally the question I get. It's sort of the tone. That's right.
Hey, that's an answer that question for the ad.
I have avoided it like.
For me, I've been asking for years.
Yeah, Carbondale's tough.
You have to ask more annoyingly. I ask annoyingly a lot.
The Carbondale location is tough.
He's like an Elgibel.
I saw the trucks in my neighborhood.
Good evening, council. We told you we'd come back with a broadband update, where we're at funding wise, those kinds of fun things. Steve did not put our reappropriations budget in the last go around. I apologize for that. We were just working through some final tuning of it. And I'll explain that in a few minutes also. But it's in the slideshow that I'm about to present to you is in the packet. It's a pretty simple slideshow. It's just kind of a comparison of 2021 actuals, 2021 the pro forma where we were going to shoot for, what the variances between those are. So pretty simple to see. 2021 we made $752,000. The pro forma had us at 1.173 million. So we were $420,000 under budget on revenue. But we kind of counterbalance all that because we've only built out 60% at this point. So OpEx is only at 926, where we're supposed to be 1.4. So we saved $497,000 basically. So we're basically $76,000 kind of under the pro forma at this moment. And most of that is based on, we're only 60% built out. I know you guys want to be built out in a year. Procurement, labor, 45 inches of snow, all kinds of fun things have really slowed us down. So we've basically stopped installing any main line at this point, and we haven't since probably late November, early December.
No complaining about the snow.
I'm not complaining about this. That's not a complaint. It's a fact. It's hard to open manholes when they're frozen down and you can't find them, kind of thing. So we have 40% more to go. We intend to finish that out in 2022 at this point. Michael's actually going to release some addresses. I think he could talk about it in the next couple of weeks or so. There's more passings that we have done. We have not been marketing really hard because it's hard to do drops to houses in the middle of the wintertime also. So we don't want to disappoint people where they're like, hey, I want to get signed up in 10 days. And then it takes us 2 months because this ground is frozen and we don't want to put too many lines just on the ground kind of thing. So in the spring, we'll hit some marketing pretty hard and Michael will go over that in a few minutes. You can see in CapEx, which is the capital expenses, all the materials and equipment, we spent 2.2, we were budgeted for 4.1. So there's that big $1.9 million we still have to spend with capital, which goes to the reappropriations, why it's kind of a large number. Bond payments, they're the same. We knew what we were going to pay, we're paid that. And then operating income, CapEx, and debt services, obviously, we're almost $2 million under the pro forma budget at this point. That's that 1,986,380. So that's just what we haven't spent that we were anticipating to spend. Okay, I moved you guys in front of my slides. I can't do that. Slide number 2 in here is just kind of a little bit longer term look. The 2020s and 2021 actuals, those are all the same numbers. The 2022 plan through 2024 plan, this is what the original pro forma showed. And what we've done is gone back, tweak that pro forma for the infiltration percentage rate that we've hit so far, the capital X we've spent, operating expenses, those kinds of fun things. We've tweaked it just to make sure that we're still good. And all the numbers we're using are super conservative. So we're just trying to kind of project this best. So I'm just going to avoid this slide. You guys have actually seen all of these numbers. And go to this slide. This is the broadband actual and revised projections. So in 2020, 2021 are still the same. 2022, we've actually lowered our revenue. And the reason for that is, I'm going to skip a couple slides ahead. In the original pro forma, the projection for infiltration was very fast. We come, they'll buy, everybody was super happy. We're seeing that trend is a little bit slower, partially because of how long it's taken us to get there. Probably because people are in contracts with people and they have to buy out of them. They don't want to do that, those kinds of fun things. And our marketing really started kind of in the summer and we hit it, but we need to hit it harder in the spring or coming into the spring and basically hit it all the way through the summer is kind of what we need to do. Because everybody else is marketing, we need to do the same thing and make sure everybody understands. And then word of mouth, neighbors, keep talking. I have it, I love it. But the orange bar basically is where we're at right now. So we're right where we're supposed to be and have projected it. It's hitting the red line, the exactly 16% at this time and date. We're a little above what the green line is, and that's our future projections. So we've taken it and said infiltration will happen up to this percentage, but we're going to take a few more years to get there, to be conservative on that revenue, to make sure that we have enough money to get to that point. Because we were basically living off the $9 million that we borrowed to build, operate, pay debt funding in some cases, those kinds of fun things. So we're trying to be as conservative as humanly possible. And we'll go back to this slide. So you can see in 2024, we're still about $500,000 underneath of where we're actually in the black. We go into the red in 2026. Previously, that was 2024, 2025. So we're just, once again, being conservative, trying to make sure we have enough money to get all the way through 2026. If it takes that long to hit that 40% market infiltration, we're going to get there. We're not worried about that. Just want to make sure we have enough money to get there. Thus, we're being conservative on that one.
Did you just say we're in the red until 2026 and then we start making the transition?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's still covering debt services and that's covering everything. So it's not discluding anything. It's still $600,000 or plus $640,000 of debt services, all those fun things. So, and that's a full staff. So part of the reappropriations we're asking for is the drops that we're doing right now to the homes On Track is doing for us. As of April 5th, that contract ends. We're fine. We're not meeting their goals for how many drops we're doing in a day, basically. And they'd kind of like to get out of the contract. We'd kind of like to get them out of the contract because it's very expensive if we're not doing enough drops. So we're looking at bringing that either in-house. So the employee count and the staff number that's built into the reappropriations cost assumes that we would hire basically 5 more people. That still fits in the pro forma. We figured we'd be at 13 people at this point. They're just shifting who those people are. So we can do it in-house and do it less expensive. But we're also looking at a very promising option that there's a local contractor who'd like to help us a day or two a week. That's basically what we do drops. We do drops on Thursdays and Fridays. We just schedule them. And then they come a week later and they do the installation. If you've gone through the process, it's actually pretty seamless. And then they're not trying to do the drop and the installation the same day and it gets a little hectic. So basically what we're suggesting is staffing is way up here to make all of that happen. And we're accounting for that in the budget. If we go this other direction with, it's basically a landscape company, it will be significantly less costly. So these numbers, once again, are conservative on the high end for the staffing levels. So in staffing, this is kind of the for the reappropriation slide. For staffing this year, we budgeted for $507,000. That's who we had on staff last year. We've added staff this year. We are adding these additional staff potentially. We're going to add a field operative that's going to do all the drops for us. So that staffing number really bumps up to $1.38 million. That may happen, that may not, depending on the drop situation. Rentals and utilities, we budgeted, we had 254,000 in 2021, budget's 269. Other, it's all those other little line items, gas, electricity kind of things was budgeted in 163 in actual, 2020 is 269. So operating next was that 926, where you can find that back in the previous slide. This year, we're looking at 1.906. And then we go outside plant construction, electronics and contracted installs is 2.1. And then we're looking at 2.4, blah, blah, blah. This all kind of adds up to $2.54968 million was the 2022 budget. Sorry, keep going.
Matt, you talked about we're gonna get out of this contract, and we're gonna have the additional staffing. Where's the credit for the contract?
So the contract doesn't have a credit. We don't have a pay in advance kind of thing. April 5th was our 1 year end of the contract anyhow. So we pay them as they do drops basically. So there is no cost to that. We're just not paying them the additional money to keep them going on.
So if we did have the staffing, we would have that cost for that, the continuation of the contract.
Correct.
All right, I got it.
That would actually be in capital X, which would be outside plant construction, all these other fun things. So it's just shifting in the line items associated with it. And I will go into more detail on that in the next one when I'll actually bring up the slide and kind of show you where all those line items are, where we're saving money, where we're spending money. This is just kind of a general overview at this point. So we've already seen the penetration rates. We're a little slower and we're projecting that to be a little bit slower than anticipated. But we're going to fix that this coming spring by hitting people with the marketing. Did everybody like the marketing that was out there on KMTS and the paper, all those other fun things? We thought it was kind of clever and fun. We did see an improvement in calls because of it. And I don't know if you want to talk about this or if you guys are okay with it.
I just have one question on it.
Yeah.
I like the marketing and the Doc Holiday and all that kind of thing. But is it clear to people that it's community broadband network, but it doesn't really say City of Beaumont Springs? Like, should it have the city logo, just to be clear to people that this is City of Beaumont Springs? Just a question.
Yeah.
I'm not a marketing person.
Sure,
so
I'm not either.
expertise.
And maybe Michael can answer that question because we do have marketing people and this was kind of the package they suggested. So Community Broadband Network is City of Glenwood Springs, but it's its
I think
own
people
thing at
know
the same
that.
time.
Yeah.
So Michael, you want to comment on that? Do you guys pull that or add that?
So we do include the WavyG on some materials. We did a letter to residents that included city branding. And then on our website, we also have a WavyG logo, some city branding. It's, we keep it on there to let folks know that we are part of the city, but we do push Community Broadband Network as kind of the main brand or the main focus point. And I think part of our goal with that is, kind of, I think a little bit different from some of our other utilities. If somebody has an internet problem, we're interested in them reaching out directly to us rather than like the main city phone line or some other standard mechanism to reach the city.
I could understand that, but I agree with Chuck. It is a city's budget. It is something.
Yeah. Well, we could definitely go back and have a conversation about it. It's not hard to add the logo to the pamphlets. And like Michael said, I do remember the ones we actually mailed out did have City of Glenwood Springs logos on it. I believe even the radio announcement said City of Glenwood Springs on it, those kinds of fun things, but definitely could talk about it. The other thing I wanted Michael to talk about was the FCC and Biden administration things that they kind of put out recently. Michael, you want to go over this slide?
Yeah, and it'll just be super quick. And if you've got questions, please let me know. We are planning another marketing kind of push this spring. It's going to be, I think, a little bit different. A lot of the materials will be similar, I suppose. But one of the things we're adopting is this broadband facts kind of nutrition label. I believe last summer, the Biden administration signed an executive order directing the FCC to provide clarity and marketing material for internet service providers across the country. The FCC has yet to formalize what that actually means, so there's not really any rules yet. However, one of the proposed ideas is this broadband fax kind of nutrition label. So you can comparatively shop provider to provider with the same kind of facts about the service, laid out in front of you. Our thoughts are we're interested in kind of adopting this now, early, sooner, I guess, to illuminate the transparency or what we're trying to do as far as the value we're trying to provide. We have no issue with filling out these boxes, creating this as a piece of our marketing material. We're not trying to lock people into promotional rates or anything like that. We're flat, standard, quality service. That's what we're about. And then, oh, go ahead.
Sorry to cut Michael off. I think it's kind of cool because, we have our bills. If you have our service, it's like 4 lines. You pay this, you pay for the Wi-Fi, here's your taxes, and here's your buck. If you go into like Comcast and look at their bills, there are 15 different line items long and you have to try to figure them out. I think that's what the government's trying to do is, hey, here is your service and this is what you get for that. And here is your service and here's what you get for that. Trying to make it easy for people to compare because a lot of people don't understand a lot of the billings, to be honest with you. So I think it's something we want to get ahead of and kind of put out there as part of the marketing piece so that they can see how very, very simple it is. And there's no $240 line there on for early termination. You want to be in the system? Fine. If you don't, there is no contract extent or contract fee to get out. So, we want to promote ourselves in that way. It's very, very simple. It's very, very fast and very, very reliable. So do you have any questions? We can get to the next one. Yep, I thought so. Michael, we're going to go to reappropriations. Is that all right? Sounds good. I'm just going to put this one slide up. We will talk about it, and then you guys can ask quick questions. Any questions you want? And this is in your packet. I just want to go over. So if you look at these line items, this is basically what we're adding to the budget for this year. If you take our budget as it exists, these are the reappropriations going into the budget. So $1.973 million looks like a huge number we're adding. It's really not. If you take the top 18 lines and you do adds, subtracts, we're adding $174,000 to those, all 18 of those line items. And basically that's in regular employees at the end of the day. So those are the employees we're potentially going to add into the system. That's the coverage. The 1799682 that's at the bottom of it is basically what we have left on the PO from Lightworks last year that we didn't spend because we only built 60% out. We're just reappropriating that to 2022 so that we have the money to spend that's already been budgeted and is already accounted for. So it looks like a big number. It's really not. And that's kind of how we're reappropriating.
So Matt, did we jump into?
Sorry, I went on the whole entire thing. Yeah.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm just
This-
going. He
this-
said go. I saw it in
Hey,
his eyes. He's like, keep
you know
this
what?
thing moving.
You know what? Can we just make a motion that incorporates the electric operations center into this as well?
I can do that.
Is there any other questions? This is a public hearing, so it's an ordinance, so it's a public hearing, so I'll turn it out to the public for comments, or I'm sorry, yes, public comments. Not questions, they don't get to question us. Well, they can comment. Okay, seeing none, either online or in the room, I'll turn it back for a motion or further discussion.
Did
Councilwoman.
you? I move to adopt ordinance 2022-11.
Second.
Been moved by Charlie, seconded by Marco. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 6-1. With Tony Hershey voting in the negative. Okay. Item number 20.
This is, I don't have a presentation for this. I apologize. This is just an action to approve the award for DM Newman Construction for the construction costs for the EOC. We came to you guys 2020 proposed building a building on the existing property we already own. We've designed, we built, or designed and bid the project. We got 2 bids on the project. They were about $50,000 apart and $5.7 million. That was pretty impressive. I feel pretty good about the drawings. DM Newman was the low bidder. They're a local contractor. We've talked to them about some BE things that we can do. We'd like to award the project to them. We had budgeted $4.5 million for that this year. It is $5.7 million. We have already gone out, done an appraisal on it. It appraised really well. And we have 3 banks looking at it right now. 2 have returned rates already to us. They're very favorable at this point. We're waiting for the 3rd one to come in. We'll be basically borrowing $6 million to accommodate for this. This number is built into the rate study conversation that we'll be having on April 7th. So broadband is still covering their $9 million. So really there's no bonding against the electric department at this point. So we would be bonding $6 million against the electric department, which it can cover. So we're asking for this award to be, you guys to award this contract to DM Newman for the bid that's attached. It was 5.742 something million.
Matt, when you say that the $6 million can be bonded against the electric, can it be bonded against the electric at the current rate structure, or would?
See,
it
that's why I
only
wish
work
Steve was
under
here
the
to
new-
answer that question.
Okay.
It is my assumption at this point, we bonded $9 million against the electric rate. It's not being paid for it, that we could still bond the $6 million against the current structure. I could have Steve verify that when he's available to do that, but that was my anticipation.
Yeah.
It is against the existing rate structure. So it's not, this bonding of this project would not be dependent on us approving the new rates.
That was my assumption, and I'm getting a verification. from
Okay,
Steve
thank
that
you.
back.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the electric operation.
I would, in that motion, I'd like you to make that, the award contingent on, approval of the financing.
I will make a motion to approve the Electric Operations Center request proposal 2021-28 award to DM Newman Construction Company contingent upon financing. Yes.
Second.
Been moved by myself, seconded by Paula. Further conversation? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Councilor Hershey.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for letting me participate. Thank you, Matt, for fixing that sinkhole today.
Did you see how quick we spent $6 million, Steve Davis? Like that. City manager, we're in the home stretch.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, city attorney.
Nothing. Thank you.
Any incoming or outgoing correspondence? I'll say real quick, I think it would be good every once in a while if we did have a reports from our boards and commissions. I've been asked that by several folks sporadically over 6 months. We got out of that habit. So maybe at the next agenda setting meeting, we can just talk about how we want to do that in what form.
Yeah, I think
now is not the time to
we
do
were
it.
doing under council comments.
Yeah, let's put it on the agenda. Okay. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Moved by Councilor Willman, seconded by Councilor Dam.
Maybe you had a.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.